Hey everyone, it's Scott Hansen from NFL Red Zone reminding you to watch Sports Ballers, the podcast that gets you caught up on everything Washington sports and beyond.
Hello and welcome to the latest edition of the Sports Ballers podcast. My name is Eric and we are celebrating our bicentennial, our 200th episode of this podcast. We started about 4 years ago and we just keep on rolling. We got a pretty big show for y'all today. We got to put a bow on the 2021-22 NBA season. We got to get a little bit into baseball, talk about some of our predictions and how they're going about 40% of the way through the year. So we'll get into that, maybe a couple other things, but we should start with the biggest news of the last week, which is the fact that the Golden State Warriors beat the Boston Celtics in 6 games to win their 4th NBA championship in the last 8 years. Steph Curry was named Finals MVP, and it was a pretty good series, I thought. Obviously, the three of us watched Game 4 in part together at Corey's bachelor party. I think we talked a little bit about that last week.
I watched most of all 6 games.
Okay. Well, that's actually impressive because normally you don't watch basketball.
No, I don't.
And in this case, Corey was tuning in. But yeah, it felt like the turning point of the series was pretty obvious, was that Game 4 when the Celtics were up by 5, despite the fact that Steph Curry was absolutely torching them. And then their offense went to sleep, but Steph Curry did not. And the end result was a huge road win for Golden State. And at that point, it just kind of figured out that it seemed like Golden State had just kind of figured out Boston's offense a little bit. Like they knew their tendencies, they knew how to play Jaylen Brown, how to play Jason Tatum, how to play into some of their shortcomings as players at this stage of their careers, how to take advantage of the fact that Boston didn't have a really trustworthy ball handler, the fact that their offense wasn't exactly consistent and kind of relied heavily on a couple of guys who are not natural playmakers. And it really just showed the championship medal of Golden State, the fact that they were able to solve a team. Normally, you don't solve teams in the NBA Finals. You just outplay them. You out-talent them. You outwork them. You out-health them in certain circumstances. But this was more really just, we figured you out, and you figured us out too. Yeah, we got Steph Curry.
I mean, the Warriors...
You figured out you can't stop him. That's what you figured out.
The Warriors still out-somethinged the Boston Celtics. What they did was they out-defensed them, and that goes right to what you're saying, Eric. They figured them out, and I think the numbers back that up. The Golden State Warriors scored at least 100 points in all 6 games of the NBA Finals. The Celtics scored 100 points twice, the 2 times they won. In the 4 losses, they could not get to triple digits, and that's because Golden State shut them down defensively, especially during those last 4 games. Both of those games that the Celtics scored 100 points in came in their first 3 games. They did not do it once down the stretch in those 3 straight losses that they suffered. The only back-to-back losses, much less back-to-back-to-back losses, they suffered all playoffs.
Yeah, and dating back to like February or something was the last time they had lost consecutive games. And of course, these numbers are meaningless. Like we can pull those numbers all day, any playoff series. We could have easily said Golden State hasn't lost at home this playoffs until they did. They lost Game 1 at home. Boston hasn't lost back-to-back games. Then it's like Boston hasn't lost 3 games in a row. Now it's Boston hasn't lost 4 games in a row. Maybe they'll win Game 7 even though they've already lost the championship. So like that's sort of where we're at with that. Again, it's really just about basketball and basketball players. Like these streaks, these anomalous situations don't matter.
Careful the ideas that you put in these executives' heads, Eric, because before you know it, they'll start saying, well, we need to play Game 7 just for the money, even though the series is over.
That would make no money because nobody would go. There's no stakes. It's like watching a pickup game. So, but anyway, I'll talk a little bit about the Warriors more in depth other than just their defense. I kind of want to get into these individual players. And I guess since we're on the thread of defense, we'll start with Draymond Green, who has been a little bit controversial to say the least, this postseason, particularly in this finals. His play has been a little bit up and down, to say the least, in this finals.
When was it
But
up? All I ever heard about Draymond being terrible.
He played
again
pretty
and again
well
and
in the
again.
last 2 games, and really even
he
in
was
game 4,
he
was
was
okay.
he was absolutely fantastic in games 5 and 6.
Yeah.
His defense was he was the reason why Golden State's defense, the primary reason at least that they shut down the Celtics. He had figured them out, and he's the guy that usually does the figuring along with the coaching staff.
And he even contributed on offense. He hit some impressive shots, some clutch jump shots. He distributed the ball well. I mean, he was I think the assist leader in game 5 if I remember correctly.
Yeah, and that's when Draymond Green is affecting the offense in a positive way. He normally actually leads this team in assists per game because he's the guy that's the trigger man when Steph gets doubled, and he's got to make the read to find the open man on the 4-on-3. And at times he can be reckless with the ball. At times he could force passes. He could press because he's worried about the fact that he himself is not necessarily a great scoring threat. But he seemed like he settled in a little bit in that role and was more productive. And like you said, Corey, hit a couple of big jump shots, hit that bailout fire drill shot over Rob Williams like from 20 feet long too. But it went in. So, hey, and once you saw that happen as a Celtics fan, you're like, okay, we definitely lost because this man not only hit not 1 but 2 threes and he hit this shot. Like it's just not going to happen. But his defense was elite. He brings such an energy to Golden State that can't be quantified in a box score or necessarily. I mean, it always is quantified in plus minus because he and Steph are virtually always at the top of that in the league. And a lot of people would say, well, Draymond leads the league in plus minus or is close to it because he plays with Steph. But Steph also plays with Draymond, and Draymond does the things that Steph doesn't or can't do, right? Like Steph, we could talk about his defense and how it's improved, but he's a 6'2" point guard. He's not going to be the anchor of any championship level defense. He needs help in that regard. What he's able to do is put a great offense out there, despite the fact that he's playing with a bunch of defense only players. Like Draymond Green is not a good defender or not a good offensive player. Neither is Gary Payton II, really. Neither is Kevon Looney. These guys are out there to play defense and get rebounds, but the offense still works because Steph Curry is that singular of an offensive force that those guys, while they're not necessarily good by NBA standards, they're still professional basketball players. They can make layups. They can make open threes at certain times. And, when you do that, you unlock this defensive potential for this team, which makes them even more lethal because the way they play in transition is incredible. And the transition opportunities come in spades when you're forcing live ball turnovers and bad shots. And, Golden State's offense off the live ball stops is incredible. Like, it's one of the best you would ever see. And so the defense leads to offense, which is great because of Steph. And then the defense is great because of Draymond. It all synergizes so perfectly, despite the fact that, Green has limitations.
Speaking of hitting some open threes, how about Draymond Green hitting 2 corner threes in 1 game?
Yeah, it's important though. Like, I feel like there is a such thing as 3 points means more when it's coming from somebody. And when Draymond
when it's
Green
a guy that
hits
you're not expecting to hit it, I mean that can definitely play into the mentality of the other team where they're like, man, even this guy is draining them from downtown. Like, what chance are we gonna have if he's hitting threes?
It's not even that you're expecting it; it's that you're counting on it. Your entire game plan is maybe we can force this guy to have to shoot, and then he makes the shots. You're done. Like, you can't win at that point because it's just. There's no other options. And, so that's really kind of what Golden State does to you, though, is that they've got this psychological advantage where they feel like opposing teams probably feel like there's certain guys that shouldn't be able to hurt you. But when they do, it's devastating because it's like, how do you get up off the mat when everything went to plan finally, which hadn't happened all series? Steph Curry was having his way with whatever defense they threw in. If they played drop, he torched them. If they switched, he torched them. If they played 4-on-3, they got open shots. But on the occasions where, for whatever reason, Golden State's offense did not function at a level to get a good offensive player and a good look, and they still came away with points, that's just crushing. Like, you can't – I feel like that's just – you hang your head and you walk down the court, and then the doubt creeps in, and you end up just being cooked. And I think Boston, the doubt definitely was there after Game 4. Then they probably had to feel after Game 5 when Steph Curry had his one bad game of the series shooting the ball, and they still lost by double digits. At that point, you're just like, how the hell can we beat these guys? Because they're not going to have multiple bad games from Steph and bad games from everybody else missing open shots, and we can't score on them. Like, so there's no realistic path to victory because you're relying on holding Golden State to sub 90 points. That's not going to happen. It just was never realistic, especially because Steph was as locked in as he is. And I guess we'll talk about him a little bit in further detail. This was a series where I've never seen him play with this level of controlled rage on the court. Like, he was hearing everything all season and all last season, and probably all the crap that was come from the last 4 or 5 years, or even dating back to 2016 when they lost that series to the Cavs in the finals. And it just felt like it all came to a boil here, where he knew this is his time to basically shut the haters up. And that's exactly what he did. He went out there and was absolutely sublime the entire series. Clearly the best player on the floor for 5 out of the 6 games. And I would even argue that the one bad game he had, he was still incredibly impactful. And he wasn't playing around. Like, there was no – you didn't see him shimmying. You didn't see him goofing off. You saw him woofing at the crowd. You saw him pointing to his ring finger. You saw him put the night-night sign up when it was time. This was vicious by Steph Curry. This was not – I'm just having a good time out here. This is, I'm here to do business, and now business is done. And again, you can't help but respect the level of commitment to winning this series and to getting this ring, which is a huge part of his legacy. I mean, anybody that wants to act like he didn't need this to validate himself, I'm like, yeah, he did. He actually really did.
Yeah, I mean, you look at he had not won a Finals MVP to this point, because Andre Iguodala won the Finals MVP from their first title, and then KD won Finals MVP in both of the following 2 titles. And, I'd be interested to hear from Eric whether he feels like those Finals MVPs were properly awarded, because I didn't really watch those series closely enough to be able to say, I think that Steph could have maybe been the MVP in this one. So I'd be very curious to hear your thoughts on that. But regardless, he hadn't won a Finals MVP. And, we can sit here and say, I don't really view Steph that differently now compared to how I did before. But anybody who downplayed his significance as a historic figure in the game of basketball has a lot less to stand on making those arguments against Steph with him having that hardware in hand.
Yeah, I think that if we want to talk about, take a stroll down memory lane here and talk about the 2015 finals when the Warriors won their first ring and Iguodala was named Finals MVP, I think that the voters absolutely got that selection wrong. And Steph Curry was clearly the best player on the Golden State Warriors in that series. He led the team in scoring. Iguodala averaged like 16.3 points per game. Steph averaged 26. I mean, it's nuts to suggest that a guy that led the team in scoring by almost 10 points per game over the second guy wasn't the MVP. And I feel like that was a situation where, now that Steph has won this Finals MVP, I feel less annoyed by it, because the fact that it became such a talking point over the years by the media, who, by the way, made the selection of Andre Iguodala. So they're basically saying they're holding Steph against himself there because they decided they didn't want to vote for him. It's like
well, Max Kellerman made the pick. He wanted Iguodala.
Yeah, he wanted Iguodala, but I like that series was interesting because that was the year that Kyrie Irving and Kevin Love both got hurt. Like, Kevin Love got hurt in the second round or first round against the Celtics, and then Kyrie Irving got hurt late in Game 1 of the NBA Finals, which the Warriors won that game. But then the Cavs came back with LeBron and a bunch of jabronis and took Game 2 in Golden State. Steph had a terrible game. And then they won Game 3 in Cleveland to go up 2-1. And then Andre Iguodala was inserted into the starting lineup for Game 4. And from then, Golden State won the next 3 games, which is basically why the award was given to him. Although Iguodala did play well. Like, he was clearly the Warriors' second best player. He stepped up when Klay Thompson was struggling. And that was kind of before Draymond Green was a known quantity. And so he certainly deserved credit as an X factor. But the fact is, every other time in NBA history, a league MVP leads his team in scoring and assists in the NBA Finals, including having 37 points in the pivotal Game 5, which was close, by the way. That game was close until the end, until Steph Curry buried the Cavs, and then they gave it to somebody else, and he didn't even earn a vote. Like, all 11 votes were given to somebody not named Steph Curry, 7 to Andre Iguodala and 4 to LeBron James, who was on the losing team. And it just felt like everybody wanted to make this series about the Herculean effort that LeBron James was putting forth, because he was playing with so many men down and making the finals interesting nonetheless. And to me, that's always rubbed me the wrong way, because LeBron did not play that well in that finals. He just took all the shots and had the ball in his hands all the time. Everybody's like, who's going to stop LeBron? I'm saying, well, the Warriors don't have to stop LeBron any better than they do. They just need to start scoring more points. Like, the games they lost 95 to 93. They lost when they scored under 100 points, when they had one of the best offenses in the league. The issue was that when Steph played bad, they lost. And then when Steph played well in Game 3, other guys didn't step up, and they still lost. Once Steph Curry got hot, and once he got a little bit of help, it was a wrap. So I just didn't understand why everything had to be so LeBron-centric there. And it felt like once it went 2-1 Cavs, every voter made up their mind that LeBron James was the de facto MVP of this series. Even though a week passed and they didn't win a game the entire time and lost most of those games by, close to double digits, somehow that means LeBron's still the MVP. It doesn't add up to me. But that's why Iguodala won the award. Again, and the thing is, when he was given that award, I didn't care, because I understood the Finals MVP to be just kind of a novelty item. It's not really that big of a deal. It doesn't really affect legacies, because everybody understands who's the best player on the team, right? Like, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar won his second Finals MVP in 1985. But at that point, Kareem was well past his prime, and Magic Johnson was entering his. Magic was clearly the best player on that team. And then in 1980, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar was still in his prime, and Magic Johnson was a rookie. Kareem was clearly the best player, but Magic won the Finals MVP. And nobody cares. Nobody said anything about how this affects this guy's legacy until Steph didn't win one. And now that he's won one, I can't help but notice that the conversation around Finals MVP has been a little quieter. Nobody really cares anymore about Finals MVP, because it was just used as a means to denigrate an all-time great player.
Yeah.
I don't think – I feel like Steph Curry's legacy, like, we already know what his legacy is for the most part, right? He'd already won 3 championships. Adding the 4th one is just sort of the sprinkles on the sundae.
Yeah, and I mean, that's what I was saying
Steph Curry
before,
changed the game of basketball forever, right?
Yeah.
Nobody shot threes in this volume until Steph Curry showed up. There's no Trae Young without a Steph Curry.
Well, I mean, and that's what I was saying, Evan, is, we understand that. We get that his 3 titles coming into this year, his 2 league MVPs, his 2 scoring championships coming into this year, the way that he, as you just said, changed the game of basketball, created this sort of 3-ball atmosphere that we now enjoy. Some people certainly hate on, but we like. We get it. We appreciate what Steph Curry is, what he has brought to the game, but people who want to say, oh, back in my day, like, people had to drive to the hoop, or like, the 3-ball has ruined the game of basketball, and other ridiculous
You should ignore
things
those
that they
people
say.
and listen to us.
I mean, I agree with that, and our listeners probably agree with that, but, one would hope that for those people who make those weird arguments to try and tear down Steph's legacy, this gives them a little bit less, to use against him.
Yeah, and I think the reason why there are people who had seemingly bias against Steph or misconceptions about his game was because the perception of basketball players is they're supposed to be big. And while Steph Curry is certainly big by average standards, he is not very big. Yeah, he's certainly not big by NBA standards. We've never seen a guy his size be as dominant, and some people really just don't know how to handle that. And it seems like, I mean, you have
Need to get over it.
I mean, and so
You
I
need to
feel like
appreciate it is what you need to do. Like the fact
Yeah,
that this guy has
where I am,
become
yeah.
such a prolific inside scorer. I mean, his finishing game. This is something that was talked about throughout the finals. If you weren't already aware, you certainly should be after watching these finals, because the announcers couldn't stop talking about how prolific of a finisher he is at the rim at his size.
He has been for a long time, so like it's not like that's new this year. He was a great finisher in 2015 and 2016 when he won those MVPs.
Yeah.
But like it's this idea that somebody that size, like there's an idea in everybody's head, and I understand why it exists, because until Steph Curry came along, history was on your side. 6'2" basketball players aren't supposed to be able to dominate because they simply lack the size in a height-driven game. But
Yeah, 6'2"
Steph
basketball players have to be good passers, because otherwise they're not really going to be like worthwhile.
Yeah, but Steph Curry has basically played at such a high level with his skill that he's rewritten what's possible on the basketball floor for smaller players. I mean, we've had great small players in the past and in the present. Chris Paul is a great player. He's not Steph Curry. Isaiah Thomas was a great player.
Muggsy Bogues.
Yeah, I'm talking great players, not
Thomas?
not you. Yeah, the one that's in the Hall of Fame, Evan.
Allen Iverson.
Oh.
Zeke. Allen Iverson's another example. Yes. Tiny Archibald. Like, there's plenty of them down the list of small players that were very good, but none were on this level where you're like, is this guy the best player in the world? And you could debate that right now, but really for the last 7 or 8 years, Steph has very much been on the short list for best player in the world. And Chris Paul, as great as he had been throughout his career, was never approaching that list. Like, it wasn't even close. So it speaks to a uniqueness in Steph Curry's place in history, being this prolific as a small guard. And so, of course, naturally, all the conversation around Steph has been, where does he rank all time now? Where does he fit? Is he in the top 10? And to me, I feel like top 10 is kind of arbitrary and unimportant. I think that as history expands, as the league pages of history grow, top 10 becomes more meaningless because you've got more basketball players. So you kind of have to expand what you consider that inner circle. But he's in the inner circle. There's no question about that. I mean, I did a little exercise in my just going through previous champions of the last 75 years, and there's only 12 guys prior to Steph that can say they were the definitive superstar on multiple championship teams. And one of those guys is George Mikan, who I don't really even count because he didn't play in an integrated league the whole time. That was a precursor to NBA basketball as far as I'm concerned. He goes in a different category. But, so if you throw him out, it's Bill Russell, it's Wilt Chamberlain, it's Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Magic Johnson, Larry Bird, Michael Jordan, Hakeem Olajuwon, Tim Duncan, Shaquille O'Neal, Kobe Bryant, LeBron James, and now Steph Curry. That's 12. So, and notice those names I read before I got to Steph, most people would have those as the best 11 players of all time. Like, you could put them in any order you want, but those are the 11 that just about anybody would have if they made a top 11.
Yeah, so it doesn't matter if you put Steph as number 12 out of those 12. He's top 12 of all time, and he's in that inner circle.
Yeah, you can debate among yourselves where you want to put him. Do you consider him better than Larry Bird? Do you consider him better than Hakeem? I personally probably wouldn't go that far.
Take any ideas for all summer long, right?
I don't have to give them the ideas. It's already started. So, but the point is, like, it's not so much that Steph has to be put ahead of those guys to get into the top 10. It's you got to pull up a seat for him at the table. That's all I have to say. And of course, there's a big piece of information. Steph Curry's not done playing basketball, so he still looks like he might not be at his peak, but he's still very much still back end of his prime in this situation. And his team just won the title. And as far as basketball goes, they're probably going to be better next year.
They're returning like basically everybody.
Yeah, and so the West might be better and might catch up. That's possible. But this team is absolutely going to be a championship contender. They are the betting favorite right now in Vegas.
As they should be.
Who in the West is going to catch up to them, right? Because it's not going to be Phoenix. It's not going to be the Lakers. No. I don't think it's going to be Dallas. It's going to be like the Nuggets or the Jazz that I just refuse to pay attention to.
Well, I mean, the Nuggets will be getting Murray back, hopefully.
The Nuggets will have Murray and Porter back, and the Clippers, I think, are a team to watch.
The Clippers?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Yes,
Yes.
because they've won so many championships in the last 10,000 years. Yes, the Clippers.
They don't have to win a championship to knock off Golden State.
Well, and they also don't
They have to contend for one. They haven't done that in their history either.
Yeah, but Golden State also hadn't won anything in 40 years until Steph Curry came along. We talked about this just a second ago. These things all exist until they don't. It's a matter of how talented are the teams. And the Clippers next year are going to have Kawhi Leonard back, presumably healthy. There's questions. Trust me, there are a lot of questions about this Clippers team. I'm not saying they're a lock to win the West, but Kawhi's going to be back. Paul George came back and looked great. He's going to be there. He's really come a long way. I think he really shed his joking playoff P mantra in the 2021 postseason.
Forgot about that.
He was fantastic that playoff, and the Clippers have done a great job loading up the rest of the pieces around them quietly. The Clippers kind of floated under the radar because Kawhi wasn't there, because Paul George missed so much time. But the
Lakers take up all the oxygen, and
that too, yeah. And so the Clippers were quietly they were a play-in team last year, and they lost to the Timberwolves, and Patrick Beverley was having a ball with it. But if they get past the Timberwolves, what actually happened was they lost to the Timberwolves, so they had to go to the 8-9 game, and then Paul George got COVID, so he couldn't play in the game against the Pelicans, and that's how the Pelicans were able to beat them, and they got the 8 seed. I would have considered picking. I would have thought about it. I would have thought about the Clippers maybe taking out the Suns if they were the 8 seed. That was a consideration. Really? Yes, and it was definitely a consideration.
But we didn't know at the time that the Suns were going to turn into a pumpkin in their series against Dallas.
I was not a big believer.
Did you think they were fraudulent at the time?
To say fraudulent would be harsh, but to say that were they the best team in the West? No.
Eric definitely expressed some questions about the Suns entering the playoffs.
Yes, I questioned.
They won 60 games.
I said that the Suns
Eric was hating.
I was not hating.
The way in the way that I was looking at the time, Eric was hating.
No, I don't think I was.
Clearly you weren't, because you were right.
My feeling on the Suns was that they were a really good team who was definitely built for the regular season because they had all this depth and these good young players that were going to play just about every game, and they could cover up some holes if somebody's missing. But when you're going up against a team where all hands are on deck, do you have the championship level ceiling? And I was like, I'm not sure they do. And they didn't. I mean, they lost to the Mavericks, who they shouldn't have lost to. That was really bad.
Nobody's losing to the Mavericks.
Yeah, if they had beaten the Mavericks, which they should have done, I certainly would have picked Golden State to beat them in the conference finals, home field or home court advantage or not. But I was not sold on the Suns, and I probably would have, if the Suns ended up getting through the West somehow, and they played this Celtics team that just lost, I would have picked the Celtics.
Oh, they definitely would have gone down. They'd have gotten swept.
Yeah, they would have gotten rolled. So, I think that the Suns were a little bit, I don't want to call them overrated because they earned all 64 of their wins. I just felt like the 64 wins were a product of the difference between the regular season and the postseason, and that caught up to them.
The point, though, is that the Clippers were already a pretty good team this year. They're probably going to be better next year, and health willing, you have to put them in the conversation for contenders. And you can say, oh, well, the odds of them staying healthy are pretty low. You could honestly make the same argument against the Warriors. You could say that their odds of staying healthy are getting lower by the year because they're already dealing with guys who have had injury histories. Steph has not had a healthy track record through his career. He's got bad ankles that, he deals with that injury on a constant basis. Clay has suffered 2 really bad injuries just in the past 3 years. Draymond's getting older. They have some young players on their team that's going to, give them some health to rely on, but those are mostly depth pieces. Their big 3 guys are getting older, and you can't count on them to necessarily be healthy. But health willing, the Warriors are going to be out there, but so are the Clippers, and so are a couple of other teams.
Yeah, maybe like you said, maybe Denver. I've had some trepidation about Denver just looking at their roster, even with those 2 guys healthy, Jamal Murray and Michael Porter Jr. Just because I worry about their defense. Because those guys
are Jokic on Denver or Utah?
Jokic is on Denver.
Yeah.
Okay. I get them confused. They're out west, and
Wait,
irrelevant.
who's on Utah that you get confused with Nikola Jokic?
I don't know.
Nobody.
Don't
but
they have some big white guy?
No, they've got Rudy Gobert, who
Not anymore.
your
Wait,
boy.
isn't Gobert gone from Utah? I thought he left. I thought he went somewhere else.
No, he was there this year. He might be gone in this offseason.
He wants out now.
But that's
we'll
what
talk about that in a little bit.
He
But he
wants out.
played
That's what it
for.
was. I knew he
Jazz
played
this
for
year.
them throughout this year, but I heard something recently, and I guess it was that he wants out.
He's in trade rumors. It's not even so much that he wants out. It's just the fact that Utah has to blow that thing up because they suck. Like they're done. Quinn Snyder hit the ejector seat. He was done. I'm out of here.
Ejector.
I'm not gonna be here. It's like Magic Johnson.
I'm not gonna be here.
I'm not gonna be here. And he's out. So I don't believe in the Jazz next year. I think I didn't believe in them this year. I wrote them off from the jump. I said that on this podcast because I listened to the NBA preview I did, and I'm gonna have to take some lumps because there are quite a few things I was wrong about. What a surprise. Namely the fact that I picked the Lakers to win the West, and
what?
That didn't happen.
He did.
Yeah, I did.
You picked the Lakers to win?
He picked Russell Westbrook to win the West.
I spent the entire podcast or that NBA preview saying I don't like this Lakers fit. I don't like the way anything looks, and I was still like.
And you didn't take your own advice.
Nah, I didn't. I talked myself into stupid things, and I regret it woefully because I should have picked Golden State. I was all about Golden State at that time, but I was just like, there's so much uncertainty with Klay Thompson. There's so much uncertainty with some of the other roster pieces, and I just was like, LeBron and AD, they got to be it. And like, I still stand by the fact that I firmly believe that if Anthony Davis was right, and I don't just mean healthy because we know that's not realistic. I'm talking about when he was on the floor. If he was playing at the level that Anthony Davis is supposed to be playing at age 28, that team would have made the playoffs. And if they got to the playoffs healthy with him and LeBron, they wouldn't have beaten the Warriors, but they would have won a playoff series. But Anthony Davis was guy on a milk carton all year. He was terrible.
I mean,
and
keep in mind
was way worse than I thought.
Keep in mind also, Evan, though, think about the timing of when Eric was making this prediction, right? This is the beginning of the NBA season. This is right around the same time that he and I were going through our breakup with the Washington football team, no longer being fans of theirs.
What's that have to do with anything?
We are going through this emotional state where we are second guessing the teams that we root for. And so Eric, who is rooting for Golden State, isn't trusting his gut that they could be good and decides to go with the Lakers.
I mean, I was definitely doing that, but it had nothing to do with the commies. I mean, come on, like that. Those are two completely independent things. There was definitely a pessimism of I want Golden State to win the West this year, so I decided not to pick them. That definitely added to my trepidation. But I think
a lot of that comes from us being Washington sports fans, though. We're constantly pessimistic about our team. We never trust when we think that our teams are going to be good.
That's fair, but let's get back to
the Lakers finished in 11th place.
Yeah, they were terrible.
We can get back to the Warriors because
they were so bad.
We can get back to the Warriors though because there are other legacies to talk about here.
Yeah, we could talk about Klay Thompson. I saw him on the list, and it's interesting because Klay was not Klay this year for when he came back and really throughout the postseason. He had some moments. Mm-hmm. Like I think he was critical for winning Game 4 because he was like the only other Warrior that could hit a shot. Like it was pretty much Steph hitting all the shots with a little help from Klay, and then Andrew Wiggins got huge in other ways, playing great defense and getting all those rebounds. But Klay Thompson was big at times, and his defense really got back to a level that we associate with Klay Thompson during the playoff run, especially in the finals, which I think was such a big deal for his confidence. Now, he didn't shoot well in Game 6. He, if it wasn't for the Warriors' awesome defense, he may have shot them out of that game. But I think people got a little bit caught up in the moment with Klay Thompson because everybody loves Klay Thompson and was so happy to see him back because he's a great player. But Klay has always been a really streaky shooter. It's not like he's a guy that just goes out there and gives you 4 out of 10 threes every night. He's always been very up and down. That's part of his game. So having him have a bad shooting game in Game 6 because, maybe he was a little too eager that night, that doesn't mean he sucks now or that, he's not the same player. It just means that he's back to being Klay as far as being hot and cold. And he was mostly cold in this series, but he was hot when it mattered the most. And the thing about Clay is
Cold with a K.
yeah, I think that there are a lot of players that you could never build a championship team around as a one, and Klay Thompson's definitely that. But I will say this about Klay. You can go throughout all of NBA history, probably just go back to when the three-point line became a thing in 1980. There's not a single championship team that wouldn't replace one of their starters for Klay Thompson and they would be better for it. And you could say, well, duh, Klay Thompson's an all-star. Every team could use another all-star. But that's not really the case, because I could easily make the case that if you put Kyrie Irving on Golden State in 2016 or 2017, who are you replacing to put Kyrie in there, and are they better? The answer is no. No, because if you take Steph off, they're not better, and if you take Klay off, they're not better because you've just lost a great defender. Klay Thompson provides the stuff that every team needs, and he can do it at multiple positions if need be. If you've got a great shooting guard, you can play Klay at the 3. If you've got a great small forward, you can play Klay at the 2. If you've got a great shooting guard and a small forward, you can play Klay at the 3 and move your small forward to power forward. He is so easy to fit.
Play stretch 4 in that situation then.
That's probably, and pun intended here, a stretch. So no, I would not say that's something he could do. But there's always a place for Klay making a team better, no matter how good they are, no matter how redundant he may seem at his position. His place has always had value because every team needs a guy that can space the floor, shoot 40+% from 3, and defend wings and guards. Like he's got the skills that make him a consummate piece on a championship team. And to me, that is a legacy in and of itself. Like a lot of people love to say, well, he couldn't do it without Steph. I'm like, okay, but there's a lot of guys that could James Worthy have done it without Magic? No, but we love him, and he was great. He's in the Hall of Fame. So I feel like that's where Klay should be looked at. Is he's an off-ball savant. Like he's just really, really good in his role, and his role is really, really valuable.
I think of this Warriors team similar to like the Vince Lombardi Packers. Like it seems like their whole starting lineup is in the Hall of Fame from those teams. And like if you're a starting player on a team that wins now 4 championships, you're doing something right. So, maybe Klay's not the same level of Hall of Famer that Steph Curry is, but he's been tremendous and deserves recognition for that.
Well, I think Klay also, and this has nothing to do with him as, X's and O's numbers on the basketball floor. He's a big part of the reason why a lot of people view Golden State as more than just, a finesse team. Because while Draymond Green is obviously rough and tumble, and Andre Iguodala is not a guy that you would, exactly consider soft, Klay Thompson went out there, tore his ACL in the NBA Finals, and walked back out of the tunnel to shoot the free throws because he knew that if he didn't return and shoot those free throws, he wouldn't be allowed to come back in the game at any point for the rest of the game. And then he went back to the locker room and found out his knee was wrecked and he wouldn't have been able to do that anyway. It showed a level of grit that, that this team just wasn't known for by the masses, but was pretty evident to anybody who would watch them regularly. They were not somebody to be trifled with physically. And also the way Klay and Steph and Draymond too responded in Game 5. They're down 3-1 against the Raptors. Kevin Durant blows out his Achilles in like the second quarter of that game. And at that point, it looked like series was over right then and there. They're on the road. It's a closeout game. And they just lost one of the best players in the world after 12 minutes of play, and he's done. And they hung in there. They got down by 6, and they clapped back and won that game somehow. And it just showed a level of intensity that this team, they don't go away when you punch them in the mouth. They don't shrink to adversity, and I think Klay Thompson's a big part of the reason why they don't do that.
Yeah,
That's what makes champions to me. Is like you have to be really good, first of all, but then you have to be able to rise above when something doesn't go right, or when you're not 100%. That's the difference between teams that, win the conference in the regular season and teams that win the championship at the end of the postseason.
Yeah, I don't know what this series necessarily does for Klay's legacy. But I can tell you that even before the series, like Rashana believed that he belonged on the 75th anniversary team. Like she thought that he should have been in that top 75 greatest of all time list, and he wound up being, not on it. He famously wore the number 77 jersey like a game later or whenever that was. But if anything, I think that the series kind of solidifies that he probably has a right to feel snubbed from that team, because regardless of what his positive impact was on the series, he didn't hold them back from winning the series, despite the fact he played a lot of minutes. I mean, I think he played 30 minutes in game 2, but in the other 5 games, he averaged like 40 minutes a game, and they were able to win. So no matter what your feelings are about whether he positively affected the team or negatively affected the team, he did not prevent them from winning this title.
Well, that's nice. But the main thing is for Clay is saying you were a key member and a regular All-Star on a 4-time champion still sounds better than the 3-time champion.
Oh, absolutely.
So it helps your legacy just by the counting stats. But I think that Klay Thompson's legacy already was set, and like I said, it was because he's a guy that every team would line up to pay if they could. Even if they were great already, they would be like, well, we could always use a Klay Thompson. And I also think that some of the things that he's done individually kind of get forgotten about because he's and again, to use this word feels inappropriate right now, but he's the lesser of the Splash Brothers. Like, Steph Curry's clearly the superior player, but Steph Curry doesn't hold the record for most threes made in a game. Klay Thompson does. Steph Curry doesn't hold the record for most points in a quarter. Klay Thompson does. So I've said it before on this show. Steph Curry is the best shooter in the history of basketball by far. It's not even close. But nobody, including Steph Curry, gets hotter than Klay Thompson when he's rolling. He is a singular game changer when he gets hot. And he's a big part of the reason why the 2018 Warriors won the championship. They battled back against the Rockets because Klay Thompson went nuts in Game 6. He's a big part of the reason they beat the Oklahoma City Thunder. Because he went nuts in Game 6 on the road. It's just something that you always have to worry about as an opponent, where it's like, yeah, Klay could be shooting, he could be 0 for 6 from 3 to start the game. But if he gets rolling, he could easily make his next 6 or 7 threes, and then the game's over. And that's just such a looming threat from that explosive of a shooter. And I think that that's part of his legacy too. Like, I think that a lot of people love to pigeonhole him as like almost like just a spot up shooter type. But how many spot up shooters score 60? Klay Thompson's done it a few times. How many spot up shooters score 37 in a quarter? Klay Thompson did that. So
how many people, period, score 37 in a quarter?
Nobody. It's Klay Thompson. That's the list. That's it.
I mean,
he's the only guy that ever did.
I mean, that's almost on the level of Kim Jong-un's shooting an 18 in an 18-hole golf course, right? That's insane.
Yes.
Well, I mean, a team scoring 37 in a quarter is like newsworthy.
It's pretty good, yeah. And he did it all by himself. And again, also just the fact that you associate those, where I think that in a game that he hit 14 threes, he took like 11 dribbles the whole game. So it's the fact that it's in and out. Like and that's part of it, though, is there's no wasted motion. It's just, hey, Klay gets the ball, he's hot, he's shooting, it's going in. And I think that when you're that level of a player, that you can get so scorching hot that you can singularly flip the outcome of a playoff series, that's noteworthy. And that's something that should be recorded in history. That's like, this is what Klay Thompson did regularly. He might not have done it every night, and he may have needed somebody to pass him the ball to do it. And he may not have had much of a game offensively outside of a couple of pull-up jump shots. He wasn't a good finisher at the rim. But at this one thing that he could do, he was unbelievable. And he also developed his defensive game to become one of the best stoppers in the world after being a really bad defender to coming into the league. Like, he has earned every bit of this celebration. And a lot of people are like making fun of him, saying, "Oh, you shot 35% for the finals." I'm like, no. He's Klay Thompson. He does what he wants. He's a made man. Don't you forget it. So I see here as well that Draymond Green's legacy is something we should discuss, which we could do that too. I don't consider Dre the same way I consider Clay, in the sense that, like I said, Clay could fit on any team, anytime. Draymond needs it to work a little bit more around him, but when he does, he is just such a big player to add to your team. Like, he is the generational defender of the 2010s, and at this point, like, he is the best defensive player we've seen probably since Kevin Garnett. I mean, he is on that level.
Really? Better than Kawhi Leonard?
Yes, absolutely better than Kawhi Leonard. Like,
Does
Kawhi
Draymond
Leonard.
Green?
Now, obviously,
Does
they
Draymond
played
Green
two
do
different
stuff that's?
I was just gonna say, I mean, obviously they played two different positions, but like, over the past decade or so, usually when people are talking about, great defenders, I hear Kawhi Leonard's name brought up first and foremost. So, like, just to kind of like continue what Evan was in the middle of asking, what is it that Draymond Green does that's like different or better than Kawhi Leonard or anybody else in the game?
That's not what I was going to ask. That's a good question too.
Okay, we'll start with Corey's question, and then we'll find out what Evan was trying to ask. So Draymond versus Kawhi is interesting because Kawhi has more Defensive Player of the Year awards than Draymond Green, but I personally feel like that's erroneous. That should not be the case. Kawhi Leonard's defense when he was at his best was incredible man defense. Like, he could lock up one guy. If you say go guard LeBron James, go guard Kevin Durant or whoever, he would do a more than adequate job putting that guy in jail. But he wasn't the rim protector that Draymond Green is, because he was a wing player. He didn't play a center position like Draymond is often asked to do. He's not the same level of help defender. He's not the guy that communicates with everybody. Like, Draymond Green really is effectively a defensive quarterback. He's like the middle linebacker of the Golden State Warriors, whereas Kawhi Leonard is, I'm sure he communicates, he talks to his teammates out there, but he's not out there.
More of a corner.
Yeah, he's more of a, that's a good analogy. He's more of a cornerback. And Draymond's value, because Draymond can also play cornerback, he's more than capable of shutting down players man-to-man. We saw him do that with Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown in this series. Like, if you ask him to go guard on the perimeter, he could do that. If you ask him to guard somebody in the post, like, you wouldn't necessarily ask Kawhi Leonard to guard a prime Anthony Davis or a Giannis Antetokounmpo in the post. Like, you would expect either help or a big man to do that. Draymond Green is tasked to do that as a small ball five a lot, and he flourishes in that role. And he singularly makes the Golden State Warriors just absolutely go on defense. I mean, he's the reason why they're always the best defensive team in the league, basically, every year of this dynasty. It's because Draymond Green is there, whereas Kawhi Leonard, I feel like he makes defenses very good. He helps a lot, but he needs more support around him for that defense to be all-time great.
Okay. So what I was going to ask is, does Draymond play a role that's sort of underappreciated or unrecognizable to the untrained eye, right? Is he like an interior defensive lineman who just eats up blocks while the linebackers and the safeties fill the gaps and clobber people all the time?
Yeah, I would say that's a way of looking at it. I mean, you can watch tape and see some incredible Draymond Green plays where you don't have to know basketball to see what the hell he did out there. Like, he's blocked shots plenty of times. He's very quick to react, to close out and things like that. But he doesn't always do the sexy things, right? Like, everybody can see when Jimmy Butler's guarding somebody on the perimeter and he eats his lunch. Or we watched Andrew Wiggins just absolutely take Jason Tatum apart on the defensive end all series. But that's what Andrew Wiggins is out there to do, and he did a great job. But Draymond Green is doing the other things when you're not looking. You're looking at Andrew Wiggins in that moment. Draymond Green is doing other things to make sure Jason Tatum doesn't have any type of out to get out from that situation where he has to go one-on-one with Andrew Wiggins. He's the guy that makes sure everybody is in position all the time. And if you watch more in-depth videos, people who know basketball could run you through all the crazy stuff that Draymond Green does on defense that you either just don't notice because the game's moving too fast, or you just wouldn't even think to look for in the first place.
Okay. There we go.
All right, so let's talk about Steve Kerr, who I have been critical of at times this season.
You said he was terrible.
At times. Almost all the time.
A couple times.
You said he was standing there watching like a traffic cone or a garden gnome or something like that.
Almost consistently.
Yeah. Every game.
And continuously. 24/7.
I actually made fun of Eric Spoelstra more for spectating, but so Steve Kerr, when I criticized him, it was during the regular season, and a big part of it had to do with the way that he was employing Steph Curry and how he messed with his rotations, and it seemed to be a big part of the reason why Steph's rhythm was off. And I felt like that was just Steve Kerr being a little too cute by half. There are times, and I stand by this, where Steve Kerr, Steve Kerr's a smart guy, and he seems like a good dude, and he certainly has earned the right, but he likes to hear himself talk a little bit. And, I feel like sometimes he likes to hear himself and see himself do different things to show off how ahead of the curve he is, and sometimes I think he errs in that regard. But my goodness, he put on a coaching clinic this postseason. He was unbelievable. And you didn't hear me chirping too much on this show during the playoffs about Steve Kerr, because he was great during the playoffs. And I feel like he benefits from obviously having a veteran team of selfless champions like Steph Curry and Klay Thompson, who are always going to do what's best for the situation, namely Steph Curry coming off the bench. Like Steve Kerr said, I wouldn't even consider asking Steph Curry to come off the bench when he came off of that injury heading into the playoffs. Steph volunteered to do it. And I think but that's sort of part of the culture that Steve Kerr has also set there, where it's a team mentality first. It's not about me, it's about we, all that type of cliche crap that people like to say. But, a lot of coaches can do stuff like that. But what Steve Kerr has done, aside from the fact that he brought in this initial philosophy of, playing this space and pace motion offense around Steph Curry, which has obviously been the big part of the reason the Golden State Warriors have emerged as this dynasty. I thought that early in his tenure, namely like 2016, when they lost that series to the Cavs, Kerr pushed some wrong buttons. He did the wrong things, making adjustments. He put certain dudes out there against LeBron James that were going to be set up to fail, and that was ultimately going to cost the Warriors. And that's no shade to Steve Kerr. He was a young coach, right? Like, I think a lot of people forget that because he had such immediate success, 2016 was only his second year as a head coach. Like, his first year as a coach, they won a championship. But now he's in year 7 or 8, and you can tell the dude's better at this. Like, he's better at making those adjustments on the fly. He has shown that he can be a better coach than some coaches that I really respect. Like, I have a lot of respect for Ime Udoka. He did a great job for the Celtics this year. Steve Kerr outcoached him big time this series. I got a lot of respect for Jason Kidd. He's improved as a coach because he was terrible in Milwaukee and with the Nets. But he was great this year.
I mean, getting a free timeout by intentionally spilling water on the floor.
I still think that was great.
I mean, if you're not cheating, you're not trying, right?
Well, he was cheating. He was cheating big time.
I have some receipts here, and keep in mind, this is just from one of our group chats because I don't have the time to go and search through all of them, but in one of the group chats, we've got April 24th, during Game 4 of the first round, Warriors versus Nuggets. Eric said Kerr decided to be a spectator again while some guy named Bones Highland hit 3 straight threes. On May 20th,
I stand by that. You should have called timeout.
During Game 2 of the series against the Mavericks, Eric said Steve Kerr out here coaching like a dummy. June 2nd, during Game 1 of the NBA Finals, Steve Kerr has some explaining to do. June 8th, during Game 3 of the Finals, feels like Kerr erred by pulling Steph in third. And then on June 9th, so this was referring to the post game from June 8th, Dre will bounce back has been uttered twice by Steve Kerr in post games this series. So Eric definitely was a little bit critical at times of Steve Kerr during the playoffs.
Okay, but the last one wasn't even being critical of Steve Kerr. That was me saying this is a problem that Draymond Green is consistently having bad games in the finals, and I was right about that. I was right about that. And by the way, Steve Kerr made a great move by benching him in Game 4. That saved their asses. So, okay, so the Bones Highland thing, I stand by. He should have called a timeout. Okay, like there's nothing wrong with pointing out in the moment bad decisions by Steve Kerr.
I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with that either. It just seems like you're singing a little bit high of praise, considering that you did have some criticisms of him at times during the playoffs.
I probably had criticisms of Steph Curry throughout the playoffs, and Steph Curry is unimpeachable this postseason, given the fact that they won the championship because of him. It happens. It happens throughout all kinds of games. I mean, he's had bad coaching moments occasionally, but mostly he was great, and he deserves credit for that. I mean, I think that everything I said about him was correct in the moment. I don't regret any of it. It wasn't like I said, and it wasn't like I said Steve Kerr should be fired. It wasn't like I said Steve Kerr needs to hit the showers and let Mike Brown take over. That would have been ridiculous. So I will take the heat for those receipts. I feel way worse about my preseason NBA predictions than I do about anything I said on these chats, especially in the heat of the moment during this finals. So I'll take the bullets on those for sure.
See, now I want to go and search the other chats.
There's like 6 of them.
Yeah, there's so many of them.
Digging through all the chats to find all my Steve Kerr spicy takes in the moment, which none of those were really that bad. Anyway, so just before we get off the Warriors, I want to give credit to some of the other guys. A guy that I've waited way too long to really talk about him, and that's Andrew Wiggins, who was really good throughout the entire postseason.
He went on a Steve Kerr rant on May 8th that broke your computer during the show. That was during the playoffs.
I don't even remember what that was about.
I don't either, but it's in our show chat. This is when your computer broke in the middle of the show.
Okay.
And apparently you were in the middle of a Steve Kerr rant.
Okay. I don't really remember what that was about. Might have to check the tape with you on that one. We'll bring you that next week. But so anyway, Andrew Wiggins was great. He was maligned a bit for being selected as an all-star starter by the fan vote, but I said at the time, should he have been a starter? No, but I thought that he was a worthy all-star selection for what he had done the first half of the year. And then the second half of the year, it seemed like some of the hate, some of the talk got in his head a little bit. He had a really bad second half up until the last couple of weeks. But then the playoffs, he really locked in. He played great defense, as I mentioned, with Jason Tatum. He's a rebounding machine. He gave some timely scoring. Like, he wasn't the most efficient scorer this playoffs. I think a lot of people have a misconception about how well he was scoring the basketball, especially in Game 5 when Steph was off. He scored 26 points, but he took a bunch of shots. Like, he was not super efficient. That's no shade to him. It's just that I think a lot of people's expectations of him were unfairly low. They hadn't watched him this year, hadn't seen the improvements he made. He could have been held to a higher standard than that, and he certainly in the other games did the little things. Again, locking up Jason Tatum is certainly something that can't be underappreciated in that series. What he did against Luka Doncic in the Western Conference Finals was absolutely great. The dunk he had on Luka was obviously going to resonate throughout the postseason. And I think that he's a guy who's really found a role and a home with this team. I think that he's one of the few guys in Golden State's rotation that has a solid offensive game. He's a good shooter. He's got some ability to shoot on the move. He can put the ball on the floor. He can get to the basket. He can finish around the rim. He's not an elite scorer, but Golden State doesn't need him to be. They just need him to be a guy who can give you a little something while playing great defense and playing his role. And that's really what he did. I'm not sure if I would say he was their second best player in the postseason. I think that Draymond Green still probably has that distinction. But given Draymond's struggles at times in the finals, I think it's safe to say he was the second best player on the Warriors in the finals. And I would say he's the second best player, period, in the finals. He was better than anybody on the Celtics. So he deserves a lot of credit for that, for really kind of figuring out how to be an impact player in the NBA after such a struggle in Minnesota for all those years. And then you've got
Boston lost.
Oh, well, I think we're all on the same page there.
Another Boston team winning, that's just unbearable.
Yeah, that would have been tough. Obviously, shout out to Kevon Looney, who great offensive rebounder, great defender, really played his role very well. Shout out to Gary Payton II, because my goodness, like that man is
break
crazy
his elbow.
Good. Yes, he had his elbow broken by Dylan Brooks, so let's not forget to cast the proper amount of aspersions for that nonsense. But he's just. I've said it before. I've never seen somebody be that good at just taking the ball from the opponent. And I said at the top of this series, it's going to be Rip City, and I was 100% right. And it's because Gary Payton II was out there just taking people's cookies all day. And I love the fact that he's also found a role on the offense, because he's not a great offensive player. He's not a great ball handler, and he's not a guy you would count on to create his own shot. But if you leave him wide open from three, he's going to make them. And he can cut to the basket and finish at the rim because he's such an athlete that he can dunk on just about anybody. And I stared at this guy all season and throughout this postseason, just wonders, like, how the hell did this guy not get a job? Like, how is he struggling to stay in the league, going in and out of the G League on two-way contracts constantly, when now he was, I think, the fifth best player on a team that just won a championship? Like, how does that happen? And the answer, of course, is Steph Curry, because normally a 6'3" guard would have an expectation of having an offensive impact and being some sort of playmaker. And with this Warriors team, Gary Payton can just be Gary Payton. And it showed that he's absolutely got a role to play if he's not asked to be a key member of the offense. And that's, something that most teams, I think, should try to build around. They should find a way to make sure the guards have something to do beyond just scoring the basketball or making passes. Like, find a role for dudes who can do something well, and you're going to have a lot of success. And I think that's why the Gary Payton situation worked out so well for the Warriors. Obviously, shout out to Otto Porter. He was great at times. He hit some big threes in Game 6. And he really kept them afloat in that ugly Game 4 against Memphis when nobody could make a shot. He was the first guy to make a three after the Warriors started 0 of 16. And he really got rolling in the fourth quarter to help them kind of stay afloat until Steph got it together and finished them off. And then Jordan Poole, who has had his ups and downs this postseason, I mean, he was so big in Game 6, the minutes that Steph came off the floor. The Warriors were up by 5 heading to the second quarter, and then they were up by 15 suddenly because Jordan Poole was just making all of his threes, even the ones he was throwing off the backboard. So,
having a pool party.
Yeah, yes, it was a pool party, and the Splash Brothers are invited. So he was fantastic at times when he needed to be. And I was really worried about him in this finals because I was just like, he's going to struggle to do anything with Rob Williams on the floor. But it seemed like he figured some things out as well and found a way to be effective even when he wasn't necessarily going to finish at the rim. And he deserves credit for that. He's 22 years old, and he took the star turn that I thought he might this year to get Golden State to this point. I think he's going to be, if he can figure out how to be at least marginal on defense, he's going to be a really good player, probably for this Golden State Warriors team as this core ages out and sort of passes the torch to the guys like Jordan Poole and Jonathan Kuminga, and hopefully James Wiseman and Moses Moody as well. So, I mean, he was definitely a guy who earned his ring here. Like, he's a big part of this championship team. And I think that's it. I don't think anybody else played huge minutes. And, fine, one more shout-out to Mr. Andre Iguodala, who, despite the fact that, I want Iguodala, he didn't do much during the playoffs, but he's the man, right? Like, this guy has been there at the start of this thing. Steve Kerr always referred to him as the adult in the room. And I thought it was a really nice moment at the end of Game 6 when Steve Kerr subbed Iguodala in to be on the floor with Draymond and Clay and Steph one more time, because I'm assuming this is probably it for Iggy as a basketball player. He's 37 years old, constantly hampered by injuries, and just not the same player as he used to be. Corey's rolling his eyes about something.
Giancarlo Stanton just grounded into a double play to end an inning.
Oh, well, I'm sorry to hear that. You can tell I'm heartbroken. So I got more shout-outs. I'm sorry. I feel like a guy at the Oscars. I got to shout out the front office for Golden State, too. They made all kinds of moves. I got to shout out Joe Lacob for spending all this money, for picking up checkbook wins, according to Brian Windhurst. They stayed the course, and they've earned the situation. But Bob Myers made all kinds of moves that people probably thought were kind of crazy when he traded D'Angelo Russell for Andrew Wiggins and that first-round pick. That was looking pretty good. The fact that he drafted Jordan Poole with the 28th pick, a lot of people thought that pick was a reach. The fact that he drafted Jonathan Kuminga, who looks like he's going to be something pretty special in the NBA with a little bit of seasoning. And Moses Moody, who was also 19 years old, was a lottery pick this year and played key minutes against Dallas in that series when Gary Payton wasn't back yet. And he kept Kevon Looney. And the big thing that I think he did that shocked a lot of people is he cut Avery Bradley in favor of keeping Gary Payton II. And a lot of people thought that move was ridiculous and dumb. And it turns out it was the smartest move anybody could have made. So he pulled all the strings right this year. And it just was such, from a top-down organizational series championship wins. So credit to all of them. I guess we got to talk a little bit about the Celtics and what they do next. I think they just need to find somebody that can handle the ball. I mean, they've got this team where they've built their identity around being a great defensive team, but we just saw that the best offensive players in the world can fracture any defense. So you're going to have to score as well. I mean, we even saw that with the Nets series where, the Nets didn't lose that series because they didn't put up points. And that's with Kevin Durant struggling throughout the series. The Nets still put up decent numbers of points. They put up 100-plus points every game. It's just the Nets defense was such a sieve that it didn't matter, the fact that Boston's offense had some limitations. But against Golden State, clearly that didn't work out. And a big part of the reason was you're asking Jason Tatum, who's a 6'10", small forward at this point, to basically play point guard. And he doesn't have the handle.
6'10"?
He's huge. Huge. So you're asking him and Jaylen Brown.
6'5".
And Jaylen Brown is also a tall man who clearly can't handle the basketball. And Marcus Smart is not a good offensive point guard. Like he doesn't make good decisions. He's not the best ball handler. I understand why he's out there. He's really scrappy. He's a great defensive player, and he can get hot at times. But it feels like they need somebody to initiate the offense a little bit better and to get the ball to Tatum and Brown in more advantageous spots. Because a lot of people are saying, well, why doesn't Jason Tatum just go home and work on being a better ball handler? It's really hard to do, right?
I mean, you should do that too, Eric. You could do it.
Yeah, I could go out there.
You just go home and work on being a better ball handler. You've got a hoop at your house.
Yes, I do. And
that's all you need, obviously.
Apparently, all you have to do is go home and practice. But
it would also be nice if Boston could get a player who, wants to beat the other team on the merits of their basketball skills rather than clearly trying to injure players like Al Horford.
Yeah, Al was quite reckless at times during the series, and I didn't see that heel turn coming. Yeah.
Does this description of the player that the Celtics need, it sounds like they had this guy multiple times in Kemba Walker and Kyrie Irving.
Yeah, but the issue with Kemba was that he was a shot fighter. His knees were basically going to give out, and his defensive limitations were so obvious, and his offense no longer made up for it. And Kyrie's Kyrie. We'll talk about him a little bit later. He's not accountable. He's not reliable. So the end result is that's the best way to describe him. So they tried to do this, and ultimately they settled on going with Marcus Smart. And to their credit, they were 2 wins away from winning the championship. So it's not like they're that far off. It's just, it feels like they need, even if Marcus Smart remains the starter for this team, you just need somebody occasionally to take the pressure off these guys and take the ball handling and initiation responsibilities. Like, it doesn't even have to be a star. It just has to be somebody who is reliable enough to bring the ball up the court, make an entry pass, make a good decision, and let these guys work where they're better suited to work.
Yeah.
And,
shot.
And when we're talking about Jason Tatum specifically, he's gotten a lot of heat this series because, frankly, he didn't play that well. But he was going up against a generational defense in his first finals. He had to deal with Draymond Green, who's going to figure it out as soon as possible. And he didn't have the most help because he didn't have the guys that were out there to do the things to help Jason Tatum to score. That being said, Jason Tatum also seemed like he was afraid of contact at times. Like he was taking all of these really hard shots, like these Kobe system type of shots. And the difference is, I think a lot of people forget, Kobe Bryant was excellent at making the most difficult shots imaginable. But he was also relentless and unafraid of drawing contact and getting to the foul line. And it felt like there were times where Tatum had an advantage going downhill. Either he beat his man or somebody created an advantage for him, and he would get to the paint, and Looney or Draymond or Wiggins would close the gap, and he could clearly just jump up and go straight to the basket and probably draw a foul. And instead he tried to maneuver around them to make some circus shot layup, and he would miss it. Or he would insist on settling for a step-back jump shot. It felt like there was a little bit too much finesse in Tatum's game. And I don't know if that was because he was shying away from contact due to whatever shoulder injury he was dealing with, but I don't really buy that either, because there were times where he was pulling dudes up off the floor with his right shoulder. And I'm like, that doesn't seem like a guy who's afraid of contact or afraid of putting that shoulder under stress. It just seemed like he was trying so hard to not get hit because he was obsessed with making the basket. And sometimes, dude, just get to the foul line, get your 2 free throws, and that's a better way to play the game. So there are certain improvements he can make, but I've said it on the podcast. He's 24 years old. 24-year-olds tend to get better. They tend to learn. And the fact that he was already in a finals at this point, already went toe-to-toe with Giannis Antetokounmpo, there's not really a whole lot I'm going to spend, saying Jason Tatum's a bum or that he's not the guy. You can't say somebody's not the guy when they put up 46 on the road head-to-head against Giannis to stave off elimination and then eventually win the series. So he's earned a lot of credit. And like some clowns are out there suggesting that Tatum's reputation and the Celtics' outlook might feel better had Jimmy Butler hit that 3 to eliminate them in Game 7. I'm like, that's crazy talk. Like, you've got to get reps in the finals, and you've got to go as far as you can. And this idea that Tatum had a bad series in the finals doesn't like that changes something. No,
it's better than having no series in the finals.
But they're arguing that there actually is better to have no series in the finals. It's better for Tatum to finish on a relatively strong note against Miami, where he was great, versus against this Warriors team where he wasn't so great, and somehow that's going to make him a better player for playing fewer games in not as high leverage moments and not learning from some of the shortcomings. It doesn't add up at all.
Yeah, I mean, you learn more from failure than from success, right? That's what concerns me most about the Bengals this year, is that they're hungry because they lost the Super Bowl. They have stuff to work on and stuff to fix. But, like, if they had won, then they'd be like, oh, well, we'll just drink out of the Stanley Cup all summer, not practice, right? So, like, if having that bad taste in your mouth, having that bad finals, I mean, that's only going to motivate them to get better. Unfortunately for me, who roots against Boston teams.
Yeah, and the thing is, it's not like their team's going anywhere. They've got this core together, and it's
they have a good coach too.
Yeah, it's going to be Ime Udoka's second year. It seems like what they implemented during the season, when they figured it out, seemingly after the new year, that's going to translate next year too. It would not surprise me one bit. In fact, we'll see what happens in free agency and things like that. But if we were picking who were going to be the 1 seeds in each conference next year, Boston is absolutely my favorite to win the 1 seed in the Eastern Conference. That doesn't mean they're going to win the East, but I think that in terms of regular season performance, this team's going to be a wagon.
So Bill Simmons is going to pick them to win 70 games this coming season, or however many he's guaranteed a few years ago.
He said 67.
And they need to win 30 out of their last 22 games to get there.
Yeah, that was over boogieing, to say the least. So we did have a question from an anonymous person. It says, "Where was KD punching the air at?" I'm assuming this means that referencing the fact that the Warriors won the championship without Kevin Durant, so he's mad and he's secretly on his burner accounts being pissed, which I'm sure there's probably something to that, but
probably in Cabo.
Like this thing with KD to me is obviously KD brings it on himself because he buys into the crap on social media. Because to me, it's a non-issue. I don't think that Kevin Durant's legacy is in question here at all. I think that I will say that I understand people's complaints with the Golden State Warriors when they had him, because it felt like, why the hell did you go to the team that beat you, that was already overpowered as it was, and this, that, and the other. And so now there's a bunch of conversation. There was a bunch of conversation about how Steph needed KD to win those rings because the only other ring he won was with that injured Cavs team that we talked about. And now that Steph has won this championship and KD is toiling away in Brooklyn, that somehow proves that Steph didn't need KD. KD needed Steph. And the truth is, they didn't need each other. They're both really good basketball players. Like, you can't tell me that Kevin Durant is incapable of being the singular superstar on a championship team. Like, that's not based off of everything we've watched Kevin Durant do throughout his career. He's been in the league 15 years now. We know what he's about. He absolutely can be the best player and the only superstar on a championship team. He could be the 1 to somebody else's 2 and win a title. They almost did it last year with gimpy James Harden and injured Kyrie, they almost managed to get to the conference finals by beating the Bucks. They were, he hit a 2 that was almost a 3 that would have won them the game, and that was just an all-time great performance. You can't question KD's greatness because here's the thing. You can't be mad at the Warriors for signing him and mad at KD for going there and saying that's overkill and then say that KD can't get it done on his own. Well, if he can't get it done on his own, then how's it overkill? Sounds like it was a great fit for him. Like, why are you complaining about him going to Golden State? Mm-hmm. The only reason to complain is because you thought they didn't need each other. They could have each done it on their own. And I firmly agree with that. Steph Curry has proven it. And I think that even though it hasn't happened, KD has certainly proven it as an individual basketball player. He is that good. And, I don't know if he's going to win another championship. His current situation is looking murky at best with Brooklyn. But we certainly know he's capable. And if it all goes well, it can happen. It just remains to be seen whether that actually comes to fruition. I mean, he made the finals when he was 22 against the Heat. And they lost that series in 5 games, but that was a closer 5-game series than people realize. And
I think today's the 10-year anniversary of that.
Yeah, and so that team didn't show up around KD or Russell Westbrook. They were both very, very good in that finals. And the Thunder continued to build around that team. They had some injury issues. They lost a 7-game series to the 73-win Golden State Warriors. Okay, that team was basically a championship team. They just ran into a team that was even better than them. That doesn't mean KD can't do this. And, this idea that people are going to razz him for that and get mad at him, I feel like part of it is the fact that he buys into it and he constantly denigrates Steph and he denigrates the Warriors subtly on social media, liking certain posts about how Steph isn't good or things like that. Like, if he didn't do that, this would be a lot easier for him to just move on and everybody would be better for it. But I don't have to participate in Kevin Durant's social media silliness. I'm simply going to speak to Kevin Durant, the basketball player, and the fools that want to try to say that he's something less than he is, they need to take a hike. All right, so NBA draft coming up. I'm not a big draft connoisseur. I don't know who's who and who's going where, to be honest, but I will be watching. I will be keeping up with, who gets who. And, Paolo Banchero is expected to be a high pick, Chet Holmgren as well. And I do want to see where those dudes end up. And I will actually be watching them in the Summer League, which, by the way, is coming up in mid-July. Can't wait.
Summer League.
I love Summer League. It's so good.
What?
While Eric is watching Summer League basketball in July, I will be watching the Tour de France.
Yes, we all have our things. And the thing is, like, I don't watch
Summer League.
Yes, you watch the Pro Bowl, so I don't want to hear it.
The Summer League. That's less relevant than the Pro Bowl.
No,
right?
that's
These
not
are
true.
G leaguers and rookies and
the Summer League is anybody. I mean, the Summer League is basically everybody except maybe like the top tier players.
No, the Summer League is mostly just rookies and hangers on. But the thing is, like, I thought it was very funny because I was watching the finals and they had an ad for the Summer League, and honestly, like, to be honest, I don't really watch Summer League that closely. I keep up with some of the rookies that I want to see. Okay, let's see what their game's about, and this, that, and the other. But obviously, the outcomes of the game don't matter. The players get 10 fouls. It's not.
Wait, what?
Yes, like it's 10 fouls to foul out in the Summer League because
do you get a baseball bat too?
Well, because it's a developmental league. Like, the entire purpose is to get these guys reps, and they don't want to be fouling guys out.
Well, but maybe those guys should be learning how to, like, not foul.
Yes, they should.
Fouls.
But, it's still – they don't want them fouling out, and I understand that. But so clearly it's not about the outcomes. But, yeah, I saw the ads for the Summer League.
Has anybody ever fouled out of a Summer League game then?
Yes.
Oh, my God.
Yes. I think his name was Damian Jones. He was a Warrior. And he actually played with them in the rotation. That was the year they signed Boogie Cousins, but Boogie wasn't back yet. So they had Damian Jones. I think that was his name. He sucked. He was terrible. And
the enforcer, I guess.
He wasn't even an enforcer. It wasn't like he was hurting people. He just couldn't play any defense and was fouling people.
So he was clumsy and unathletic.
And unaware. I would say unaware. He was very athletic, just unaware. and he played a summer league game. I think he got 10 fouls, which is so
Did he get a
good.
triple-double, right? Like, he had to have 10 points,
No.
10 assists, and fouls.
That was his only double, was the fouls.
Oh,
So,
jeez.
but anyway, I saw the ad for Summer League pop up, and for a brief moment, I was like, I'm so excited for that, because I was watching the NBA Finals just stressing out the whole time. It's been 2 months of this playoff slog where it's just intense basketball all the time. It's great, but it's a lot. And then I'm just like, man, could you imagine going from the NBA Finals to the most low-stakes basketball imaginable, the Summer League? And I'm just like, that sounds really nice right now. Just sit back, drink a beer, sit on the couch, and watch some nonsense basketball for an hour before I flip to something else. And it's fun because it's in Vegas, so they make it entertaining, and they've got like the players show up and hang out and watch and stuff. Like it's an enjoyable waste of time.
Yeah,
So
that sounds like how Evan feels when he's like, watching the Super Bowl, and it's like, after a month of just high stakes football, like constantly, stressing over the outcomes of games, to seeing, oh, we got commercials for the AF.
It might be the same thing. That's fine. I like the Summer League. And you know why I like the Summer League? Because it lasts 10 days. It's done. We're done. We're moving on.
It's only 10 days.
Thought it was like months.
They might have different ones, but no, it's a handful of games just to get these guys some opportunity to play professional basketball together, and then it's time to move to the offseason. And speaking of the offseason, that's where we're moving next. And the NBA offseason is getting started a little early. We haven't quite gotten to free agency yet, but we've had some silliness already. It sounds like Kyrie Irving is not all that committed to staying with the Brooklyn Nets, and therefore the Brooklyn Nets are probably going to have to do something about
Kyrie
that.
Irving not being committed to something.
Kyrie not happy somewhere? Who would have thought? So there's, of course,
as if the Earth is round.
Yeah, the only things that Kyrie Irving is committed to are bad science takes.
Yeah, well, Kyrie...
I mean, the thing is with science, there aren't takes, right? You're right or you're wrong. So he's just wrong.
Yeah, he's holding a bunch of L's in that regard. But I'm curious to see how this goes, just because Kyrie's history speaks for itself. He's unreliable. He's unaccountable. He doesn't show up to work whenever he doesn't feel like it. If it's not the vaccine, it's something else. He whined his way out of Cleveland when he was playing with LeBron James and contending for championships. Then he whined his way out of Boston when I don't know why he whined his way out of Boston. I sympathize for being in Boston, but other than that, I don't get it. And then he goes to Brooklyn and seemingly has his dream scenario where he gets to play with Kevin Durant, and somehow he's messing that up too. Like, the thing is, it feels like the Nets almost just are willing to give him a mulligan for the nonsense that he put him through this year, but that's still not enough. And they're saying basically, okay, dude, we need you to really come through here. We're willing to put this behind us, but you got to be committed to doing this thing. And it seems like Kyrie's almost like saying, I don't know, I don't really want to do that. Well, then who the hell's going to want you? Yeah, basically, yeah. He's Larry David, except he's not very funny. He's not funny at all, actually. He's just a dork. And, I find it to be a little bit annoying. And there's also a small detail of, honestly, Kyrie Irving's a really good basketball player. But is he that good to put up with all this? The answer is no, he's not.
Send him to Minnesota.
Trade for D'Angelo Russell back. Just take him back, I mean, and so the Nets are... I will say the Nets are hopeless if they just lose Kyrie for nothing. Like, if they get a bag of beans back for him, they're not going to win with Kevin Durant, Ben Simmons if he ever shows up, and whatever the hell else they have left. That's not a championship team.
Ben Simmons.
But, it seems like the Kyrie era is ending, which is great because he's missed more games than he's played in his 3 years being there.
The Kyrie era didn't even really begin.
Yeah, it wasn't much of an era. But so, of course, there's teams that have popped up as having interest in him. The most interesting, of course, is the Lakers. And the Lakers have their own problems. And I don't think that the Nets have the problems or the solutions that the Lakers want. And the Lakers certainly don't have the solutions that the Nets want. But if they're the only teams that can make it work, maybe it happens. I don't know. Like this could get spicy, and this is sort of the NBA's got 2 seasons: the playoffs and the offseason, right? Like the regular season is just kind of for giggles, but that's neither here nor there.
The Orioles lost to Eric Fedde.
Oh, jeez.
3-0.
So of course that begs the question though, like what happens if Kyrie Irving leaves? How does that affect Kevin Durant? Well, KD signed a long-term supermax there, so obviously he would have to tell the Nets, you better get rid of me, or they'd have to find some way to build around KD post Kyrie Irving, which I don't know how that's going to go. But we talked about a little earlier about KD having the merits to win a championship as the guy. I still believe that, but man, it's hard to see it happening just because of all the chaos that's going on around him. And you hate to say it, but it's true. Some of it's self-induced. You decided to roll around with Kyrie Irving. You said, I'm going to put stock in Kyrie Irving and James Harden. And, well, here we are. So, but at the same time, KD left Golden State clearly because his priority was no longer just winning championships, which is fine.
He wanted to be the guy.
Yeah, he wanted to be the guy. He wanted to play his way. And if he could still do that, he absolutely still could, and they could still be competitive. And if they do this right, which the Nets historically have never done, they could win a championship. But it's so much harder now, given the fact that he's put himself in a position where he's going to be screwed over by Kyrie Irving, just like everybody else has been. So, hope it all works out.
Younger either.
Now he's going to be 34 this year, so that's a tough situation for him. No woe is me when it's self-inflicted, but I don't even think the worst forecasters could have seen this debacle being this bad. Like, I didn't think this was going to happen. I thought it was going to be
favorites
weird.
to win the championship in the offseason.
Yes.
Last year.
I picked them to win the title.
You picked Nets versus Lakers in the finals.
I went pure chalk, and it was terrible. It didn't work.
Chalk?
It was chalk.
I can't even tell you what mineral it actually was instead of chalk. It was, I don't know,
something else.
Kaolinite or something.
Or make something up.
Organic material, right? It was fecal matter.
Oh, jeez. Very much fecal matter. Yeah. Basura. All right, so that leaves the Lakers and Russell Westbrook. We know that they want to get rid of him. Yeah. We know they want to cut him loose if they can. He's going to pick up his $47 million option because, of course, he is. Who's going to say no to that?
As one does.
Yeah. Like, people don't typically say, don't give me money. So
give me $47 million.
Yes, I would take that. So I think that, we talked about this really since the middle of the season when it was clear this wasn't going to work out. And they were going to have to try to get rid of him if they wanted to re-up this thing and get back into the mix in the Western Conference. But we'll see how all that plays out. We still got a long way to go before we got to get to the draft first, and then we'll get to free agency sometime in early July. But other names to keep your eyes on. James Harden is a free agent, but he's probably going to opt in and stay with the Sixers. There's been a lot of talk about Bradley Beal, where he's going to end up. He said that he's already made his decision, but he's just not telling anybody yet, which, come on, just tell me that you're going to take
Wizards should make his decision for him. Get rid of him.
Yeah, I don't think that's going to happen, but there has been.
Wizards want to win?
I don't know. I don't know. The Wizards have flown under the radar as a really bad franchise for the last, 40 years. Like, I feel like we know about it because we're here, but on the national scale, people talk about the Clippers, they talk about the Nets, they talk about the Kings, they talk about the Timberwolves. The Wizards kind of slide a little bit, but they are right in there. Like as much of a seat as Steph Curry now has at the table of the NBA's inner circle greats, the Wizards are definitely at that table with the losers of the league. Like pure and simple. That's where they belong. I mean, they if they weren't there, they certainly have taken the Suns spot. But the Suns are really interested in getting it back because they don't want DeAndre Ayton, which is just nuts.
inexplicable.
Yeah, so that's looking like that's going down the route of a sign and trade. Like they'll probably try to There's a lot of teams are interested because DeAndre Ayton's really good and he occupies a position that's really hard to fill. And so the Hawks are interested in him. The Pelicans might be interested in him. Like there are plenty. The Pistons might be
DeAndre Ayton and Zion Williamson on the same team. Rather that Zion can,
Zion might go to the Suns. He might be in the trade.
But he'll block out the sun with his waist.
That's the risk that the Suns have to take because when Zion's on the floor, he's great, but
if he's not falling through it.
Yeah, if he's not getting hurt either. I mean, so we'll see how that goes. I think that's going to be an underrated storyline is DeAndre Ayton and where he ends up because that's like when it's a situation like that, it affects two contenders, presumably, right? Like assuming a good team gets him, like it makes them better and it makes a contender in the Suns worse. And if DeAndre Ayton's not there,
what if Ayton goes to Dallas somehow? Like is Ayton, would he be the addition that the Mavericks were trying to get with Kristaps Porzingis?
I don't know how well that really works. They just they just traded for Christian Wood, who is obviously not as good as DeAndre Ayton, but he's yeah, exactly. He played for the Rockets. He's a pretty good, but seemingly the Rockets fans were not sad to see him go. He's a center who can play pick and roll with Luka. I actually think that on offense he's going to be really valuable for them. Defensively, I think he's got some limitations. He's certainly not going to turn the Mavericks into a championship team. But DeAndre Ayton, I don't know if he and Luka really work because Ayton likes to work out of the post and Luka likes to have the lane clear because he likes to drive. So I don't know if that works. I don't know if the Mavericks have the assets to really make it work because this is sort of the Suns' choice. If it's a sign and trade situation, they do have a little bit of agency here. In saying
the 76ers got James Harden for Ben Simmons. Right? Ben Simmons was a complete zero, and they got James Harden, who's a non-zero.
That's true. I mean, that's a good point, and there are always surprises with what team is willing to do something really stupid to acquire somebody, or what team. Sometimes it's the trades you don't make that kill you, and the ones you don't necessarily hear about until like 2 years later when you say they wanted this from this team and they said no, and you're like, what the hell were you thinking doing that? Why didn't you take that deal?
So it's like what the Ravens were doing a couple years ago, getting Calais Campbell and Yannick Ngakoue and some other guys. They're just here's some magic beans, and we'll get an All-Pro. And the Jags are like, okay, well, fine.
Sounds good.
Like you just bend over and take it. Like who's your general manager right now? Why hasn't the Suns GM been fired yet? We're even considering letting DeAndre Ayton walk for nothing.
Well, that's because this isn't his fault. This is an ownership issue, being too cheap to pay him. Robert Sarver
Their
doesn't
ownership
want
is
to pay
too
him.
cheap to pay him?
Yes, this is a Sarver call, and Sarver is universally considered one of the worst owners in the league. He's currently under investigation for having a racist work environment, which, wonderful.
Oh, no.
So he could very well end up going the Donald Sterling route soon enough. So yeah, this is on him. The front office for the Suns has done everything they could despite working with this clown. That's why they're where they are, where they're actually able to win some games, despite the fact that this goofball owns the team.
Oh my God. Okay, so I didn't know that. I thought it was the GM's like, trying to be too cute and it's like, oh, we can just find another DeAndre Ayton, just in the draft somewhere.
Well, and it's bizarre behavior because the Suns drafted Jalen Smith out of Maryland, and they decided not to pick up his rookie option because he was, kind of slotted behind DeAndre Ayton. He wasn't really getting on the floor. But then they don't pay Ayton. So I'm like, you're going to keep neither of these guys? Like, it doesn't make any sense. Wouldn't you figure you'd at least pick up Smith's third-year option? And then Smith...
Bring back Alex Len.
Oh, God. But Smith ends up getting some nice minutes in when DeAndre Ayton got COVID and had to miss a few, probably a couple weeks worth of games. And Smith looks pretty good. So then they traded him to the Pacers, And now they're getting rid of DeAndre Ayton. So who's going to be their starting center? JaVale McGee? I mean, come on.
Shaqtin' a fool.
I mean, it's just malpractice. I would be having a fit if I rooted for the Phoenix Suns. Like, you actually managed to somehow fall ass backwards into this really good team that is a piece or two maybe away from winning a championship, and instead you're going backwards.
Yeah, it's like getting rid of Nick Markakis and replacing him with Travis Snyder. Oh, wait, that happened.
Yes, it did. Last guy I want to mention is Jalen Brunson. He's the one of the guards for the Dallas. He plays for the Dallas Mavericks. He was probably their second best player, at least offensively. He was the only guy that they could actually count on to create some offense for himself and for others, other than Luka Doncic. But he's a pending free agent, and it'll be interesting to see what the Mavericks do with him, because they went to the Western Conference Finals, and he was a big part of the reason why. But is he a guy that you want to give a big bag to when you've got Luka Doncic and you've been dying to pair Luka with another star? Do you really want this guy taking up a big-time money slot to do that? So they've got some decisions to make on that front as well.
Okay.
And so that does it for the 2022 season. I didn't get Ime Udoka fired, at least presumably not yet.
Currently, anyway. We have to wait till next season tips off, right? Because Sean Payton made it through the season. Yeah, and, he's gone.
Unbelievable. Yeah. So, Ime Udoka, please stay healthy, stay happy, and stay with the Celtics just to break this curse. I'm going to feel really bad because, you seem like a good guy and a really good young coach. So, we're going to hop over to baseball. Talk a little A's Hun to start. So the Orioles earned a split with the Toronto Blue Jays and took 2 of 3 from the Rays, but they lost to the Nats today in their first game of the Masson Cup, which is unfortunate. But prior to this, they had won 7 of 12. And some news on the farm: Heston Kjerstad is batting .423. He's got 3 doubles, 7 RBIs, 3 walks in his first 7 games with the Delmarva Shorebirds. Kjerstad, as you listeners may know, we've mentioned it on here, he was the Orioles' #1 pick, and then he got COVID and was out with myocarditis for an extended period of time. But now he's actually playing again, and this is a reminder that he's got some talent. He's probably going to be pretty good. So happy to see him finally being able to start his baseball career and having some success.
He was the best hitter in the SEC in the shortened 2020 college season.
Mm-hmm.
That's why he was drafted.
Yep.
Apparently he's got a cannon for an arm too.
Love that.
In the outfield, lefty batter. Remember those Jay Gibbons commercials where they had those ladies working in the office in the warehouse, and all of a sudden the windows keep getting smashed, and they giggle. Oh, it must be Gibbons again. This could be this guy. Lefty who hits bombs.
I have a really hard time with Jay Gibbons just because that dork at baseball camp tried to tell me that Jay Gibbons was better than Ichiro, and I was just I just still pisses me off. It really makes me mad. I'm just so insulting.
I hope that guy finds this podcast, whoever you are out there.
Maybe he's the anonymous guy. Maybe he's the guy that gave us the anonymous
mailbag. Right now. That was a bad take. Okay.
Jesus. Oh, God.
Jay Gibbons versus Ichiro.
I don't think Ichiro is that good. I think Jay Gibbons is better than Ichiro. I'm like,
Jay Gibbons?
So you're out of your mind.
Bigby. Luis Matos.
That's just
he might be better than Ichiro.
Oh my God.
Marty Cordova.
Maybe Travis Snyder's better too.
Yeah, Travis Snyder. Boy, Lunchbox.
God. All right, so General Manager Mike Elias has narrowed his focus for the #1 pick this year to 5 or 6 players. Andrew Jones' son, Drew Jones, that's a mouthful, is probably among them, and I agree he should be. Andrew Jones was great, and I imagine his son is similarly good. So, like I mentioned,
he's a high school player in Georgia, I think, and he was playing a game, and the other team was taunting him, and the very next pitch, he cranks it over the right center field fence and poses and stares at him and stuff. It was glorious.
Absolutely should do so. Andrew Jones, by the way, greatest defensive outfielder ever. Ever.
Oh,
Yes.
I mean, Willie Mays, I guess, would like a word.
Willie Mays can have his word. Andrew Jones, GOAT.
Okay.
Willie Mays is definitely a better overall player, though. No questions asked. Willie Mays is the GOAT. Like, the GOAT ever of baseball. GOAT.
I mean, Hank Aaron would like a word at that, too.
No, I'm going to take Willie Mays over Hank Aaron. Anyway.
It's an embarrassment of riches at that
yes,
point.
We're spoiled for choice here. Those are two amazing baseball players. So, Orioles got 2. They just lost 1 to the Nats, and then they've got 4 at the White Sox, which sounded a lot more intimidating back in April than it does now because what they're doing.
I mean, it sounded more intimidating in April, but it's the Orioles, remember? So they're just
better than I thought they would be.
They are better than we thought.
And the White Sox are a lot worse.
The White Sox. I picked them to go to the World Series, and they stink like cheese. Thing is, the last time the Orioles were in Chicago to play the White Sox, I was also in Chicago, and that game got rained out. Miserable night, and it was so windy, my umbrella just crumbled.
You got anything else to say about the
O's, hon?
O's, hon?
I'm still a little salty they didn't win tonight.
That's fair.
They scored a grand total of 0 runs, and I think they only got 3 hits. So, I'm sorry, 4 hits. They got 4.
That's not very good. That's not going to cut it.
This just in, letter by attorney working for Commanders details 2009 sexual assault allegations against owner Dan Snyder. Washington Post. It's ESPN alert.
Jeez.
Literally right
now. Okay, well, hopefully Danny Boy finally gets what's coming to him, but that never happens, so.
I'm not holding my breath.
Neither am I. So, Corey, tell us about your awesome Yankees.
Well, a little bit less awesome tonight. We had been 6-1 since last week's show, but then we went and lost tonight against the Rays 5-4. Just as I was about to sing some of Nestor Cortez's praises and talk about, last week I said he was coming off a terrible start, and then he bounced back with a nice, 5 1/3 innings of 1-run ball last Wednesday. Well, he gave up 4 runs in less than 5 innings pitched today. So, not great from Nestor Cortez, but Garrett Cole, much to Evan's enjoyment, has bounced back with 2 straight good games. He pitched 6 shutout innings last Tuesday, and then gave up just 1 run in 7 1/3 yesterday. So
no hitter into the 8th inning yesterday.
Yeah. So at least one of the 2 has bounced back, and Cortez just needs to be more consistent. He's young. It's his first year really pitching, as a starter in a rotation like this. So, some bumps along the way are to be expected. The good news is that he's not stringing together a ton of really bad starts in a row, unlike Mackenzie Gore, who now has 2 straight terrible starts against the Rockies of all teams for me. But that's beside the point. The Yankees are the first team to 50 wins. Going into today, they were on pace for 120, the record being 116. So today's loss, still has them on pace for a record. Not that they're necessarily going to keep that pace, but they're playing really good ball. They'd been 6-1 since last week's show. The previous week they were 5-1. The week before that they were 6-0. So this is only their 3rd loss in the last 3 weeks of games. So, who am I to complain about one blip today? Aaron Judge got the day basically off today. He did pinch hit with 2 outs in the bottom of the 9th in a 1-run game. He flew out, but he leads all players in votes for the All-Star game. He's one of 6 players with more than 1 million votes. The others being Mike Trout, Mookie Betts, Ronald Acuna, Bryce Harper, and Alejandro Kirk, the Blue Jays catcher. So, Kirk, who I hadn't really heard of until Corey Froughton picked him up for his fantasy team, getting some love.
I hadn't heard of him until literally right now. No idea who that is. Yeah. And the Orioles just played the Blue Jays.
Well, he's got 1 million votes, Evan, one of 6 players. So there you go. Judge only hit 1 home run this past week. So while he does still lead baseball at 25, He allowed Mike Trout to close the gap because Trout hit 5 home runs this past week. Just every day I'm filling in stats for Corey Fronton, and Trout hit another home run. Oh, Trout hit 2 home runs. Good Lord. Trout is up to 21. He and Judge are the only 2 players with 20 on the year, though Pete Alonso, Byron Buxton, and Anthony Rizzo each have 19. Speaking of Anthony Rizzo, he was the one providing the power for the Yankees this past week. He hit 4 home runs since our last show. He had a big game last Thursday. He tied the game in the 6th with an RBI single, and then he walked the Yankees off with a solo shot in the 9th inning. So that's what's been up with the Yankees recently. Mostly good.
When did you find out the stats about Pete Alonso having 19 home runs? Because he hit 1 tonight.
Oh, well, that was earlier. I prepared all this before the game started today because usually we start the show earlier. But anyway.
Well, the polar bear has gone deep again. He frosted one into the seats.
Well, he joins Aaron Judge and Mike Trout as the 3rd player now to hit 20 home runs this season.
On my fantasy team, by the way.
Yes, he is.
Love Pete Alonso.
Pete Alonso's great.
Yeah. By the way, for Corey Fronton, Matt Olson has been pretty good since Corey dropped him and ended up on this Corey's team.
Oh.
Just saying.
Y'all should go by last name, right? This is too many people with the same name.
Something that I don't think has ever in the history of the world been said about the name Corey.
I've met I think 12 other Evans in my life.
There's a ton of Erics out there.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So, in our friend group, we had a bunch of Johns and a bunch of Michaels, and they're all on last name, right? So we can figure out who's who.
Yeah. So, anyway.
Okay. Fantasy baseball. Anything interesting happened this week that anybody wants to talk about?
Well, I rolled to another win. So over
He said
Deep Fly Factory.
So enthusiastically, it's almost like you hadn't gotten used to losing after 2 straight losses.
Yeah, well, got back on the horse against Drew's team, so that might do it for his year.
Yeah, I lost to the other Corey, so I'm trying to get back on the winning horse against Sean this week. I'm off to a pretty decent start.
I'm already up by 40-some points on District Dingers.
Yeah, you had 3 pitchers go yesterday, and all of them scored double digits.
Yes.
Plus, I'm pretty sure you
tonight,
got
Pete Alonso's got...
And the funniest part is, if I remember correctly, those 3 pitchers all got double digits despite none of them getting the win in their game. The win that you got yesterday came from your reliever.
Who was relieving one of my starters.
Yes.
Yeah, that happened.
Yeah.
Pete Alonso's got 6 tonight. Ryan McMahon, 8.75 today. Yeah. Adley Rutschman got a point. Ryan Mountcastle 1 3/4. It's just
2 of your Orioles players scored positive points despite the Orioles not scoring a run? How'd that happen?
Well, considering that, I might not have started these guys, but everybody else on my team is injured. Joe Musgrove, COVID. I picked up Walker Buehler, who's been moved to the 60-day injured list. He was on the 15. I can get rid of him, I guess. Mookie Betts injured list. Jeff McNeil day-to-day. Manny Machado rolled his ankle on Sunday.
Yeah, but they're expecting that he is going to avoid an IL stint, so clearly they don't think that it's anything too severe.
Still not on my team tonight, right? So this is just a brutal week for injuries. I picked up Walker Buehler thing and maybe he comes back. I can stash him. And hopefully nobody will slap me for stashing players on the IL. But, might be.
Get the shirts ready.
Time to come. Yeah. Oh, I still think that's fun. Were you going to slap somebody over fantasy football?
Well, probably
7 months
there
later?
are worse reasons to slap somebody. There's also probably better reasons to slap somebody.
Yeah, ask Will Smith.
Oh yeah.
There's a question for you. Is that a better reason or a worse reason?
It's a better reason, but it was a worse venue.
Fair enough.
It was worse timing.
International live TV is better than or worse than batting practice
Well,
on a
and
cell phone camera
yeah,
somewhere.
batting practice while you're playing a sport versus you're supposed to be at this super sophisticated, classy event, and you're walking on stage, bitch slapping people and dropping f-bombs on live television. It's very unbecoming, especially considering 20 minutes later he won Best Actor, and that was supposed to be the highlight moment of
That
his
was
acting
such
career.
an awkward
It's,
speech.
I was like, I gotta watch the rest of this just to see if he's gonna win this Best Actor. I was like. That was the second week of Game Theory with Bomani Jones. I wanted to tune in live, but I was like, nah, I gotta see this. I'll tape it. I gotta check this out. It's gonna be great. Anyway, that's it for fantasy baseball. I guess my team did not do well. I was admittedly loafing. I had a lot on my mind, a lot going on, a lot of other things to worry about, and I was doing a very poor job setting my lineup.
You're busy winning 5 awards for dancing.
Yeah, my mom asked me if she could put that on Facebook, and I was like, fine, go ahead. But yes, I had a good Saturday. Not in fantasy baseball though.
Not a big noon Saturday.
I was winning similarly sized trophies for real competition, not numbers on a spreadsheet, I guess. But that's neither here nor there. Okay, so we'll do a little bit of stuff with this muddied baseball thing that came out last week, I think. So Major League Baseball is I guess outlining new requirements for scuffing the baseballs and getting them ready for game use.
Basically trying to create more like consistency across the game.
Yeah, and So
is this about the Delaware River mud?
Yes.
That secret spot mud
that comes in a can.
Yeah.
Jesus. So all the I'll just blow through these quick bullet points while the peanut gallery continues to exchange jokes. All balls to be used in a specific game must be muddied within 3 hours of all other balls to be used for that game. After muddying, all balls must be placed back in the Rawlings box with dividers before being stored back in the humidor. All game balls must be stored in the humidor for at least 14 days before being muddied. You know what? I'm not reading all this. It doesn't matter. Like that's a
Make
whole
sure
lot
your
of
balls
stuff.
are in the humidor for 2 weeks before you muddy them. It's very important.
Yes, that's what you need to know. Basically, baseball's got a bad track record with their baseballs lately being not the same, weird, juicing them, not juicing them, different consistencies, whatnot. And baseball is actually saying, gee, considering we are the richest and highest level of play in the world at this sport, maybe we should take an interest in making sure the equipment's all the same. But, what do I know? So let's talk a little bit about our preseason predictions and, what we think about them now. So we're going to do a little contenders versus pretenders. We did this last year around this time. And so we're going to talk about teams, particularly that we thought would miss the playoffs, that are above 500. And we'll call out the individuals for these
for their
seemingly off-base predictions.
Potentially bad takes.
But we're still willing to, either double down on them or acknowledge that maybe we didn't know what the hell we were talking about. So we'll start with the American League. The first one on the board, the first one being called to explain himself, is Corey. Not loving the Red Sox. Picked them to miss the playoffs. They are 37-31. Corey, are the Red Sox a pretender in your opinion, or are you willing to come around on them being better than you thought and might actually be in the mix here?
Well, obviously they are in the mix right now. They're the number 2 wild card team in the American League, and while there are still teams that are enough in the mix that they could easily fall out of it, I'm not going to double down on my take, but I'm also not going to apologize for my take on the Red Sox, because this is something we've talked about together before. The Red Sox, you just never know what you're going to get from year to year. Like the years that you expect them to be good, they wind up being trash, and the years that you expect that they're going to continue to be bad, they wind up bouncing back and winning a World Series. Like, so the Red Sox are the Red Sox. Like, they're completely unpredictable from year to year and from week to week, and they are playing good baseball right now. As we speak,
them in the playoffs.
They've won 7 of their last 10. but they're 12 and a half games back in the division. They're only half a game ahead of the Rays, who had to basically do a complete flip-flop. They had to go 3-7 in their last 10 just to fall behind the Red Sox. So, who knows? They've got a good run differential. They actually have the second best run differential in the division and the third best run differential in the American League. So, are they contenders? Are they pretenders? They're one of them. That's about the best I can do.
That's not the point of this exercise. This was your idea. You got to make a call here, dude. Not letting you off the hook with that. That's nonsense. Come on.
Reading daily. You know what, dude? So Corey, what you put in the notes here is good enough, but it doesn't fully describe the terribleness of your take about leaving the Red Sox out of the playoffs. So all three of us have in the American League the Blue Jays, Yankees, and Rays, or out of the American League East rather. Those three teams all in the playoffs. Eric and I put the Red Sox in as well, but Corey, instead of the Red Sox, you put the Seattle Mariners in the wild card 1 position.
Hey,
so
the Mariners are only 10 games below 500. They're not done yet.
Start with "Let me explain." Okay, the Mariners right now. The Mariners.
No, I just said it.
We're worse than the Orioles.
They're half a game worse than the Orioles.
It's not worse than the Orioles. It's still worse. It's not where you want to be.
All right, I implored you not to pick them. I told you this is a bad idea.
It says Mariners.
I got 20 years of trauma on my side to tell you that was a bad idea. Don't pick the Mariners. Oh my goodness. All right, so I guess the fact that there are no names listed here means that none of us picked the Twins to make the playoffs. But they are 38-30 and are winning the division. So I guess we all have to say how we feel about this and what we think is gonna go down here. I will say, and my definition of a contender is that I think this team's going to make the playoffs. Like, it's not. I think they're going to win the pennant.
Sure.
So I think at this point the Twins are going to make the playoffs. Like, do I think they're good? I question that. But at this point, their division is so sorry, and the White Sox are such phonies that I gotta figure you can pencil them in to win this crummy division at this point. I would certainly pick them ahead of the other bunch of crummy teams here, and one of them's got to make it. So, yeah, I'll ride with the Twins at this point.
Yeah, I'm not to excuse my decision to pick the White Sox, because my decision to pick them was more than just me not realizing that Carlos Rodon was not with them anymore. It was also who else was going to win in this division. The AL Central is notoriously bad, and none of the other teams seemed even remotely capable of surpassing the White Sox. But both the Twins and the Guardians, by the way, are ahead of them right now, and by a few games. So, I don't think the White Sox are going to win this division. Only one team from the Central is going to make the playoffs, in my opinion. So the question for me on contender versus pretender is, which one is more the contender between the Twins and the Guardians? And I'm going to say the Twins.
I am going to willingly and dive headfirst into having this clip played back to me in October. But I'm going to double down on the bad take. White Sox win this division. Cleveland and Minnesota, both pretenders. I don't believe in either one of them. As hard as it is to believe in the White Sox, they certainly have the most talent in this division. And it's inexcusable that they're not winning this division right now. Right? The other 4 teams in this division are hot garbage. Okay? So, it's sort of, you can't beat them, join them. Well, they can't beat them, so they're joining them, right? Like, we might have a division winner where the winner's under 500. So, this is terrible out of all y'all, especially the White Sox, because I had higher expectations.
I think the Twins...
They should get it done.
I think the Twins can stay ahead of the White Sox. I mean, based partly on the performance of the White Sox to this point, but also because the Twins have some guys who are actually playing good ball. They have 6 guys on their roster who are hitting 280 or better. Stephen Kwan has been really strong for them this season. Jose Ramirez has been fantastic. He's got a OPS over 1,000 right now.
He was on Cleveland.
Yeah, he plays for the Guardians.
Ah, whoops.
Oh, yeah.
How did you not know that?
Did you smush the teams together and then say they're going to beat the White Sox?
I'm mixing up my rosters.
Oh, God.
Well, shoot. Maybe I need to switch over and say the Guardians can win this thing. I don't know.
Jose Ramirez has been one of the best players in the league for a while.
I know, he has.
Yeah.
The
thing is, everybody starts saying he's one of the best players in the league, and then he sucked last year. Or the year before. Yeah.
He had a down year.
This guy's one of the most underrated players in all of baseball. He's terrible.
I was mixing up my offensive players. So, the Guardians actually, they have a good offense, but the problem for them is their pitching. And I don't trust the pitching enough to lift that team. So, I'm going to stick with the Twins.
Okay, well, I think that we kind of covered the Guardians by proxy when talking about the Twins.
Yeah,
because,
so we can move on to the National League.
Yeah, so let's talk National League.
Oh, you want to move on? You got some explaining to do here too.
I do.
Yeah. Well, I'll have to own my take in a little bit later. But let's go with the most egregious looking one right now. Corey Puffett.
Yeah.
You did not have the Mets making the playoffs.
I did not. I did not have them.
They are 45-24.
They are the best team in Major League Baseball, not named the Yankees.
So are they a contender or a pretender?
At this point, they are solidly a contender, especially when you take into consideration they haven't really slowed down at all since losing Max Scherzer, and they are slated to get Jacob deGrom back at some point. So they're a legit contender. I was wrong to leave them out of the playoffs. I still have my concerns about whether they can stick through and actually win a pennant, because the Mets are the Mets might Mets at some point. But as far as making the playoffs, they're making the playoffs, and they are almost certainly going to win this division at this point. I don't see. I think the Braves have the talent, but the Mets have been playing so well that I find it hard to believe that the Braves can make up 5.5 games, even with as much season as there is left. I struggle to believe that they can make up those 5.5 games during the time frame that they have at their disposal.
I can't wait for this NL playoffs, right? You got the Mets, the Dodgers,
the National League playoffs is going to be really exciting. I mean, the American League playoffs should be fun too, but the National League playoffs, you actually have, potentially 6 teams that all deserve to be there.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
can't wait.
Baseball playoffs, if they speed up the games a little bit, it's going to be must-see TV.
I don't care about slow games in the playoffs. I care about slow games in the regular season. Get those over.
The playoffs last year were such a slog. It was 3 hours into the game. It was like the 5th inning.
Yeah, I barely even watched the World Series, and that's something I never miss. It's just it was a bit much. So y'all are gonna have to explain yourselves for this one, but not really, because I totally get it. Neither you, Evan, or you, Corey, picked the Phillies to make the playoffs, but they are currently sitting at 36-32. So are the Phillies
currently sitting out of the playoffs?
Yes. Are they a contender or a pretender?
I say pretender.
I agree. Come
on. What have we seen from the Phillies over the last few years that should make me declare to the entire world that I think they're going to make the playoffs? Literally nothing. There's nothing here, right? It's fool's gold every single year with the Phillies. Say this over and over. They spent all this money, and they got nothing for it. They fired their manager, I think deservedly so, Joe Girardi. When you have all these good players and you don't win, it's a leadership issue. So they got rid of him, and they won 7 games in a row to get to this point. So but like I don't see it out of them. I just don't.
Yeah. I do not see. I don't see it either. The Phillies have Bryce Harper, and that's really it. I don't think that they even have a single other player on their roster who's batting above 275.
Let's take a look.
So
Kyle
batting,
Schwarber's on their team.
Kyle Schwarber's batting like 213.
He still hits dingers.
Well, he hits stingers, but he's not getting on base very much, and he's not like when you're hitting 213, it doesn't matter how many home runs you're hitting, unless you're hitting like Aaron Judge number home runs. Like you're not making up for your liability as a hitter. So
Joey Gallo Joey Gallo still manages to be productive despite batting like 180. So
Yeah. Well, they
Kyle
only have
Schwarber's got
six qualified hitters on here.
Kyle Schwarber's got an 826 OPS. He's got a 1.3 wins above replacement. He's doing pretty good.
Yeah. So their number
Regardless,
two
they don't have
batting average
enough-
guy is 257 in Alec Bohm.
They don't have enough guys who are hitting at a high enough level. Their pitching is kind of so-so. I mean, they went on a little bit of a hot streak after getting rid of Joe Girardi. That's all that this is right now. That's the only reason that they're above 500.
Did they go Heigh-Ho, the witch is dead, like in the clubhouse or something? Like what?
It was Ding Dong, the witch is dead.
Yes, yeah.
Ding Dong. What did I?
You're thinking Heigh-Ho, like
Heigh-Ho, it's off to work we go.
Yeah, you're thinking Snow White.
Okay.
Jeez.
Mess that up then.
Yeah, but yes,
anyway.
they did something like that, and that's only going to work temporarily. So the Phillies are still, in my mind, a pretender. I am doubling down hard. I don't think they're just going to miss the playoffs. I don't think they're going to finish above 500 this season.
Oh, I mean, that. Yeah, I might agree with that too. Also, their fielding is bad as well. They're not a good fielding team, right? So, like, if your pitchers are struggling, you can make your pitchers better by having superior fielding defense. But like, if you don't even have that, if you don't have guys who get the balls they shouldn't, if you don't have, if you have a bunch of Mark Trumbos out in the outfield who play outs into hits, right? That makes your pitching inherently worse.
Yes.
Yep, no doubt about it.
Yep.
All right, so next on our list of contenders or pretenders, I have to talk about the St. Louis Cardinals, and this is just torture because I hate talking about the St. Louis Cardinals in any context.
I picked the Cardinals.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I'm kind of looking at this. I'm like, how the hell was that? I was like, how the hell am I the only one that didn't pick the Cardinals to make the playoffs? Like, well, is this okay?
Because you picked the Phillies. To
Yeah.
make the playoffs.
Yeah, I did, which I also found strange. I was like, why did I do that? So I'm going to stick with my guns here and say the Cardinals are a pretender. And I say that because I don't think that they're going to get any better than what they are. And what they are is kind of pretty good, maybe, but not special. And so we've got 3 wild card slots. I think the Brewers are going to still win that division. They got 3 wild card spots to potentially take. The Braves look like they're going to take 1. The Padres/Dodgers, probably the Padres, are going to take the other. And then you've got the Giants and the Phillies in the mix. And I don't really believe in the Phillies, but I do believe in the Giants a little bit. And I think the Giants will get back into this thing and could take that 3rd spot. So I think the Cardinals are still going to float around 84, 85 wins like they had the last couple of years. But I think – well, actually – last year they did make the playoffs. They went on that ridiculous run late to get in, which pissed me off. But so I think that if you had to ask me, because I think the Braves are ahead of them right now, and so are the Padres. So that leaves the Giants, who I think are a game or maybe a game and a half or a half a game behind them. I would have to take the Giants.
The Giants are half game ahead of the Cardinals for the last wild card spot.
Okay, so the Cardinals aren't even in right now. Okay.
No.
So I feel even better about that.
But still, they're 7 games above 500. They're going to be contending for that playoff spot. They might not get it, but
they
this
are
is a really
currently
deep
contending.
National League right now.
That's the Angels would just like to be currently contending and then suddenly not anymore.
Well, but at the same time,
Remember
when I picked my playoff teams, it wasn't like I said the other 9 teams in each league that don't make it are gonna suck and be below 500. So it's
Yeah.
not like the Cardinals are kind of where I thought they would be. Sort of the 7th team out of 6, and I think that I'm fine with what I said about them before. Does that make them a contender? Well, if that's your definition of it, then I guess they are. But in my definition, I don't think they're making the playoffs. So to me, they're not a contender.
Just keep in mind, the Cardinals currently have, I believe he's now the betting favorite to win National League MVP, Paul Goldschmidt.
When Goldschmidt,
Goldie.
it's 2 home runs every single night. That's not sustainable.
Yeah, he
Just
might
shrugging
be the
at me?
betting favorite. He might be the betting favorite, but the actual leader right now is still Manuel
Arturo Machado.
That's right. So let's
How
not
did
get
you-
that twisted.
How did you know that we were both going to go 3 names?
I don't know. It's a synergy there, I guess.
Yeah.
This
That's
is
what
why we
happens
do
when you've done
podcasts.
200 episodes together.
Yeah, we just kind
Yeah.
of get on the same page. Okay, so last team, hilariously enough, after I sung their praises, I did not pick the Giants to make the playoffs, and neither did Evan. Corey apparently
No.
did, but they're 37-29, currently occupying the 3rd and final wild card spot in the National League. So I guess I'll start with Evan.
Oh.
Do you think the Giants are a contender or a pretender?
I think, I think yes, only because I'd rather root for them than the Cardinals. Because I just can't stand the Cardinals. They're so boring, so dull. They're so, we have the best fans in baseball. Like, no, you don't. Come on. Okay, so I just don't like the Cardinals. So yes, Giants are a contender. You know who I like is Gabe Kapler. Where did this
Boy.
guy come from? He was the worst manager in the history of baseball with the Phillies. They fired him way too late, right? They should have fired him as soon as he forgot to warm up a relief pitcher one time. Like, what is this guy doing? Get him out of here. That 100% happened on live TV. Yes, it did. It was against the Braves and delayed the game because, the pitcher's arm was about to fall off. So, Gabe Kapler was just terrible, but he goes over to the Giants, and all of a sudden he's insightful, and he's, he's got like brilliant strategy and stuff, and he's such a good talker, and I have jealousy of his beard looking immaculate every single day. Like who is his barber that tightens that up for him all the time? That's amazing. So he was explaining the how stupid the unwritten rules of baseball were. Like, what's not to like about this guy? And he's got that team playing well, even though I don't understand why.
You are not kidding. That beard is sharp.
Yeah.
That is. I need to get on that program. That's pretty nice.
So
Anyway,
before we move on from Contenders and Pretenders,
Well, no, I've got to talk
okay.
because I'm a Giants non-believer apparently. Didn't even remember that. Yeah, I'm gonna say they're a contender. I mean, they shocked us last year. I bet on them not doing that again this year. And while they're not as good, they certainly are better than I thought. And so I'm going to ride with them. The entire season last year, I was waiting for this team to fall back to earth and not be the team that they were. And they never did. So I'm not going to fight it this year. I'm going to say, hey, this team is legit. And, as far as Gabe Kapler goes, we talked about it with Steve Kerr, obviously on a different level there, but you are allowed to get better at your job. Like, you are allowed to learn from not warming up a relief pitcher, which I didn't think you'd have to learn from that.
Couldn't have gotten any worse.
And then a change of environment. I mean, you go from Philadelphia to, San Francisco, a little bit of a different culture there, just being in the area and stuff like that. So, maybe that's part of it. Maybe he just figured, hey, I was a goofball in Philly. I need to shape up if I want to, keep working in this whole coaching thing. So maybe he read a book. I don't know. Okay, Corey, you go ahead. Say whatever you wanted to say.
Yeah. So I was just gonna say before we move on from Contenders and Pretenders, Evan, Could you just point out to our audience who the very last team that I put in the American League playoffs was?
The last team?
Yeah, the number 3 wildcard team.
You have the Rays.
Oh, is that right? I thought I put the Yankees as the last one.
You have them as wildcard 2.
Wow. Oh, regardless, I did not believe in the Yankees very much.
No faith in your own squad. That's
Well, I have the Yankees as wildcard 3. So
maybe that's your recovering commie fan there, not believing in your Yankees.
Well, we all have the Blue Jays winning the East. I believe we all thought the Blue Jays were winning the East in a runaway.
Yes.
And that is unlikely.
No.
Yeah, that's unlikely considering they're 11 and a half games back, 70 games into the season.
Tough to win that way.
Yeah.
All right, so let's do a little football before we get out of here. So the Ravens wrapped up their mandatory minicamp. Lamar Jackson just showing up. No update on his contract, and now they get to go chilling until training camp. That's probably the case for a lot of teams around the league. But bigger piece of news: Rob Gronkowski has retired for the second time. He's hanging it up, maybe forever this time.
He did supposedly suggest that he could come back midseason if Tom Brady picks up the phone.
Mid-season.
So he wants to be a guy that only shows up for the playoff run, I guess, the stretch run of the season.
I guess Tom
Like
Brady
Ben
did.
Simmons was
Tom
supposed
Brady
to do.
retweeted the story with a picture of a dude on the cell phone. So he's already picking up the phone.
Yeah, well, I'm sure Tommy wants Gronk back, but whatever. But so I guess we're here again, talking about Rob Gronkowski and his legacy. And
I mean, is his legacy any different now compared to when he retired the first time?
I think you could make the case that it's a little bit has changed just because the volume's improved. I mean, we compared him to Tony Gonzalez and talked about how Gonzalez had the edge because he had the longevity. And while Gronk clearly didn't, surpass Tony Gonzalez with his counting stats, he got closer.
Yeah.
And, if you're somebody that thinks that he just had to get closer and not all the way there in order to surpass Tony Gonzalez, maybe your opinion has changed. But as far as I'm concerned, the fact that he won a Super Bowl and played a big role in their playoff run, like he caught 2 touchdowns in that Super Bowl, he was a big part of it. I think that bolsters my belief. Like my big reason why I put him ahead of Tony Gonzalez wasn't just the fact that at peak level I thought he was better. It was because he had a postseason imprint. He's got this. I think he's got the second most touchdown catches in playoff history. And while granted, some of that is not necessarily just because Gronk is, a better playoff performer than Tony Gonzalez. Obviously, he played with a better team, a more consistent playoff team, so we got more chances. But I feel like if we're going to factor in longevity and we're going to factor in, health, which is such a crapshoot when you're playing friggin' football, then I think that it's fair to look at other circumstances like not just like how good are you at catching a football and running with it and breaking tackles, like how big of moments did you have and are you on all-time highlight tapes? And you don't have to think of it that way, but I think it's something to consider. And I think that the fact that he was there for another Super Bowl win maybe helps a little bit.
Yeah, no, that's fair.
Wasn't this Gronkowski's 4th championship a couple years ago?
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's kind of like what we were talking about with Steph Curry. This guy wins a 4th championship after a little bit of a break. His legacy's written already, and we just add a little bit more onto it. So I'm looking here. Rob Gronkowski is 5th all-time in receiving yards as a tight end, only behind Tony Gonzalez, Jason Witten, Antonio Gates, and Shannon Sharp. So those guys were pretty good. He was going to be a Hall of Famer before he came back to play with the Buccaneers for 2 years. So, he's done nothing to tarnish what we already knew about him.
No,
he just did some more of it.
Yeah, I think that when we talk about whether his legacy is any different now, I think it's really just where do we stack him compared to somebody like Tony Gonzalez? I mean, so when he first retired, immediately following that, we recorded our 34th episode of the podcast. People can go back and listen to our
150 episodes ago.
Right. You can go back and listen to our initial discussion on Gronk's legacy from then. And if I remember correctly, I had Tony Gonzalez ahead of Rob Gronkowski. I think Eric already kind of had Gronk ahead of Gonzalez, but it was like very much a 1A, 1B sort of thing for Eric. So I think that's really kind of the question that we have to answer here. I don't really remember what Evan's take was at the time, but
my take was probably something along the lines of, you can't have the conversation of who's the best tight end without mentioning him.
Yeah. And I agreed with that fully then. I agree with that now. And I do think that the playoff performance that Gronk put together this year in particular, or rather last year in particular, definitely puts him just that little bit above Gonzalez for me.
Oh, wow.
It's still tough because
Above.
Gonzalez really kind of changed the game at tight end. I mean, that, you talk about like Steph Curry changing the game for a shorter guy in the NBA, for an outside shooter specialist in the NBA. And Gonzalez kind of did that for tight ends. Not to say that there were not good, borderline prolific pass catchers at the tight end position before. I mean, you can go back to Mike Ditka. Mike Ditka was a really good pass catching tight end back in the day, but that's not like he didn't
put up the volume.
He didn't put up the
like
volume that Gonzalez did. He did not, regardless of how big of performances he had at that position, he didn't have coaches going, oh man, we can do this with this position. We got to go and find these players to fill that role. Whereas, Gonzalez kind of paved the way for guys like Jason Witten, guys like Rob Gronkowski, guys like Travis Kelce, and the list goes on.
Mm-hmm.
And so to me, it was going to take a lot to surpass that. And it's definitely very close. But when Gronk came back out of retirement, I don't want to say I had low expectations for him, because I didn't. Gronk is a great player, and he's not going to come back unless he feels like he can perform at a level, that is worth coming back for. He's not somebody who's going to come back and put his body through the ringer, through the kind of, beating that he has taken through his career, if he wasn't going to be, a difference maker for his team. But I did have some questions about how healthy could he stay? Was he going to be able to stay healthy enough to, to put up the volume that, we've come to expect from him? And he did. In my mind, he did. He surpassed my expectations on his second stint in the NFL. And that, along with the performances that he put together in the playoffs, specifically when they matter the most, that is enough for me, by a very small margin, to be willing to say I think that he might actually be the greatest tight end of all time, even ahead of Tony Gonzalez.
Well, and one thing that I oftentimes consider when we get into the longevity conversation is, like, did the player leave because he wanted to, or was the league just done with him? Like, he couldn't play anymore. And I feel like there is a difference there. I feel like when you walk away on your own terms, it gives you a little bit of, to me, it gives you a little boost. Like, it's like you could have stayed, you could have accumulated more stats, you could have added another Pro Bowl or something like that. You chose to walk away because of a personal choice. Like, to me, that it hits a little different when that's the case. And I do feel like that's what Gronk is doing. Like, obviously he wasn't peak Gronk anymore, but he was still more than good enough to be, that guy. Whereas, I feel like other players that retire at a relatively young age do it because it's like, I just can't be a good football player anymore.
Yeah, but, I think you still have to get to a certain, within a certain distance of some of the players who played for longer. For example, Barry Sanders, in my opinion, if he had kept playing, and he could have kept playing, he would be the greatest running back of all time. But I can't say that because he didn't play long enough. And despite the fact that he chose when he left, the league did not spit him out and say we're done with you. He chose when he was going to leave. I can't put him ahead of Walter Payton. I can't put him ahead of Emmitt Smith. I can't put him ahead of Jim Brown. I can't put him ahead of those players because he did not play long enough to get there. Give him a few more years, sure. And he could have gone a few more years and then still left early. And I'd probably be willing to give him the benefit of the doubt and say, yeah, this dude was the best.
Yeah, but a lot of people feel the opposite of that. They feel that the fact that he did leave early is like he was forced out, not because he couldn't play anymore, but because the Lions broke his heart and he just couldn't do it anymore.
That's fair. That's true.
So he gets a lot of sympathy points. Plus, it's like there's a what could have been factor beyond just he's cooked.
Well, I mean, because peak Barry Sanders probably was the best peak running back that the league has ever seen.
Yeah, and it's not like his career was short. Like he
still played
10 years.
Yeah, he still played 10 years.
Yeah, he played.
Barry Sanders is fourth all time in rushing yards. But
his career was kind of short compared to some of the other all-time great running backs.
Compared to Frank Gore, who played 10,000 years. Did you know Frank Gore was teammates with Red Grange back in the day? Remember that?
Well, now that we've gotten off the topic of Gronk, I would say that I would take Barry Sanders over Emmitt Smith, but maybe not over Walter Payton, and definitely not over Jim Brown, who also retired prematurely. You got to keep that in mind with him as well. But an interesting conversation though isn't just about Gronk versus Gonzalez or where he ranks all time. It's also about Travis Kelce, who has certainly built a Hall of Fame resume in his own right. And there's a lot of conversation that a lot of people believe that Travis Kelce will surpass Gronk. And I find that hilarious that people would even suggest something so ridiculous. Like
I don't find that hilarious.
I find it laughable.
I think that
I find it absolutely laughable.
I think it's possible.
There's no chance.
I'm not going to sit here and predict it, but to say that that's completely outside the range of possibilities, I think is naive.
I don't think that's naive at all. I think it's 100% guaranteed. Travis Kelce is going to be – he's 33 years old, and not one day in his life has he ever been as good as Rob Gronkowski was at his best. There's no way. There's just no way. He hasn't even been the first option on his team. Tyreek Hill was. So, no, it's a laughable proposition. It's not even a question.
I mean,
it's not his fault that he actually had a good wide receiver to play with, as opposed to Rob Gronkowski, who
and yet he still couldn't put up Gronk's numbers, even though he had single coverage all the time. He could just run that stupid little scoop route that he does, where he's covered for 0% of his route and get 10 yards every play. He got that all the time. Rob Gronkowski would be double teamed every play, and he still was more productive than the best of Travis Kelce. It's not even a question.
I will say though. While I agree with you, Eric, the numbers, on the other hand, just looking at the receiving yards, he's got 9,006 in 127 games. Rob Gronkowski has 9,286 in 143 games.
Okay, what about touchdowns? Tight ends got to score.
Yeah, touchdowns.
The big gap.
See that on here.
The big gap.
Oh, yeah. 57 for Kelce, 92 for Gronk.
Big gap. Plus, Gronk was a much better blocker. So throw that in there, too.
Yeah, we might get a chance to see what Travis Kelce can do against double teams this year now that Tyreek Hill is a Dolphin.
Yeah, we'll see what happens.
Instead of a person.
Instead of a chief, yes. All right.
It's getting late.
Yeah.
It is. We spent almost 2 hours just on basketball.
It's the end of the season, man. There's lots to talk about. Okay, so we'll move to, for the umpteenth time,
this just
Deshaun
won't
Watson.
leave the news.
Oh my God. Watson settled 20 of his 24 lawsuits out of court, which it felt like that we should. I think that was information that could have been made public a while ago, but we just found out. Don't know why.
4 remain unsettled, plus 1 that had been filed but was dropped when a judge said the plaintiff would have to refile with her name on the suit. Sounds like a bunch of legalese there.
Pretty much.
Well, for a guy that seemingly was gung-ho to never settle because he did nothing wrong, well, it sure sounds like Deshaun Watson's done a lot of settling, which indicates, I understand that settling out of court doesn't necessarily imply guilt. But when you were so vehement that you weren't going to do this, and then you do, that certainly implies guilt.
Yeah, I think it implies guilt. Like if
completely.
somebody accused me of anything, even nearly as heinous as what Deshaun Watson is accused of, like, if somebody's going to be so bold to try to tarnish my reputation and my character, my credibility, then I'm going to be just as bold to fight for it. So like, I'm just going to settle out of court, right? Like I'm going to prove my innocence if I'm innocent. Maybe that's just the way I think. That's maybe not the smartest legal thing. If you can just write a check to somebody to get the big mess to go away, then maybe you do that. But settling 20 out of the 24 lawsuits. I mean, I have determined that he's guilty in the court of public opinion. And that's
at least your public opinion,
yeah. Yeah, he's guilty in the court between my ears, I guess. And like finding this information out, I don't know what has changed really. Like in terms of what we would discuss
is our opinion not necessarily our opinion because we already had feeling like there was something here, but I think that this kind of adds credence to that, as Eric just said. I mean, when you're fighting, you're arguing so vehemently that I did nothing wrong and I'm not going to settle because I did nothing wrong, and I don't guilty people settle, and then you settle like. I need to spell it out.
I still feel like that doesn't change anything, right? We already knew that. There was obviously something here, right? He's saying all this stuff. He did nothing wrong. I'm like, well, that's kind of hard to believe that you didn't do anything wrong. I'm sorry. There's too much smoke for there not to be a fire here.
Yeah, this piece of information is like a 1 pound weight added to the pile of evidence that's already 2 tons heavy. Like, it doesn't really move the needle much. It's something, but it's not, compared to what's already there, it really doesn't matter.
Somebody spilled their water bottle in the ocean.
Yes, that's another adequate analogy, yes. So we'll see what happens with Watson. The NFL is reportedly, I didn't really understand this. I guess maybe they've changed their protocols on this, but apparently they are, quote-unquote, seeking a year-long suspension. I'm like, seeking it from who? You're the NFL,
right? You're the ones who are
your choice
hand it to him or not.
But
apparently they changed it in the CBA where they go to an independent judge person. The technical term right there, the independent judge person, to determine what the punishment should be, and then if the player or the Players Association appeals it, then it goes to Goodell to adjudicate the appeal.
Okay. Well, I mean, that makes some sense because it was always ridiculous that Goodell would be, the guy in charge of handling the appeal of his own decision. Like, he's not going to change his mind because you complained to him. Like, you got to complain to somebody else.
I feel like these type of issues should be sent to some sort of, a tribunal or something, like a panel of ownership and former players who, have a sense of all the perspectives of all the stakeholders in the league and a sense of the history of the league and past precedent in similar situations. Now, hopefully there's never a similar situation to this, but I feel like that would be the way to determine what the appropriate punishment should be for any transgressions on field or off.
That sounds like it's too good of an idea for the NFL to do anything with. So,
Yeah, they should fly me up to Park Avenue. I've got got plenty of ideas.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. That does it for football discussion. Before we get out of here, one more thing to discuss. Evan and I went to Hershey Park yesterday. Woo!
Yes, we did.
Had a great time.
Mm-hmm.
Rode pretty much everything. The only thing we didn't get on was the bright green Jolly Rancher ride, which is just, right. You've seen a million theme parks already that they painted green instead of that brownish color that the Sidewinder used to be. But I had a good time. I got on some of the newer or new-ish rides that I hadn't ridden before. I had never done Candy Mayonium before, and never had ridden Skyrush. So that was exciting.
Oh yeah, I mean, Candemonium, it's solid, right? It's no nitro or anything like that. Because nitro, it knocked my socks all the way off. They're somewhere else in the parking lot or something. But Candemonium was solid. Skyrush was amazing. So I had it ranked number 3, but it's still down to number 4 behind Steel Vengeance X2 and of course Fury 325, which Eric, you're familiar. Ooh, Lord.
Very familiar at this point, yes.
Yeah.
As was my cell phone.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Yes.
Intimately familiar.
Yes. But yeah, we got on Skyrush that first trip on the morning, and I was like, okay, I thought this was supposed to be like all the rage, and I was like, okay, that was not bad, but a little slow. And then the second time we rode, I was like, oh, okay, I get it now. This thing's starting. It's humming. And then the last time we rode, I was like, it blew my mind. I was like, oh my goodness. I was willing to wait for the technicians to fix the ride or whatever to ride it a half hour after closing. Yes, so that was a great time. Didn't buy any candy or milkshakes or anything of the sort while we were there. It was all business all the time. So maybe next
Pepsi.
time. Yes, maybe next time I'll spend a little more time, buying some goodies instead of just tearing it up on the rides. But I had a great time. Thank you for inviting me. And
thank you for coming. Oh my goodness, I was so happy to have somebody to come with me.
The ride home from your house, by the way, was an adventure. Oh my God, that was something else. I don't know. My GPS decided I told you to take me 70 to 32, and I'm driving on 32, and all these orange barrels are everywhere. And suddenly the orange barrels stack up in front of my lane. Then I had to go into the other lane. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to end up like in a sinkhole or something and just not going to make it home.
Oddly enough, I think
behind me.
There's a truck. Yeah. Oddly enough, I think the sinkhole on 270 South is why your GPS took you that way.
Unbelievable. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Well,
only the state of Maryland had some good highway design engineers. Somebody, maybe.
Yes. Somebody, from the Georgia Institute of Technology could maybe help out.
I mean, I'm not naming any names, but I know some people who, have some experience in these matters.
Yes, indeed. All right. Well, that pretty much wraps our show up. Thank you guys for tuning in. This was episode 200, which we are very proud of that we've gotten to this point without killing each other or just getting tired of this. We still love doing the show every week.
Canceled.
Yeah, no cancellation for the sports ballers. Nobody's getting mad. Thank you
I tried to get us canceled with that kicker comment a few months ago.
Oh my God. Thank you to whoever this anonymous source was that sent us a mailbag question. Whoever you are, feel free to make yourself not anonymous if you want.
I know who it is, and you guys can know. They just didn't want their name on the podcast.
Oh, I see. Okay. All right. Well, then go ahead and keep it to yourself, or you could Corey can tell us later if you whatever. Doesn't matter. But thank you for the mailbag question. Always appreciated that little bit added to the show. Do you guys have any shout outs before we get rolling?
Yeah, I got a couple of shout outs.
Well, shout out to the anonymous person who didn't want their name on the podcast, but do they know that nobody listens to this? Right? Yeah.
I love how earlier today, Evan says, there is absolutely nobody on this list of famous people from where he lives. And if we get some listeners, maybe he can get his name added to that list, even if we get a few listeners. But he constantly downplays how many listeners we have. That's not a way to exude confidence and get our listenership up.
Well, it's partly shtick.
No,
like,
I know
it's
I hope it's all shtick.
You know,
it is for me.
I was just looking at that list of names. I'm like, I've never heard of any of these people. So like, what it seems that the bar to clear to be a famous person from Elk Ridge, Maryland, is kind of low. Is all I'm saying.
Fair point.
A few shots to me, for me. So Rashawn and I went to Connecticut this past weekend. I want to congratulate her god sister and her husband, Aussie and Sean Miller, on getting married. They are going on their honeymoon, and then they're going to be down in Durham for our wedding in a few weeks. So, shout out to them for all the traveling that they're going to be doing over the next few weeks. Shout out to Rashonda's cousin, Devin Fredericks, who absolutely crushed it on the drums. He's 10 years old, or about to be 10 years old, and he crushed it on the drums during the wedding. So that was really cool. And shout out to the guy at REI today. I went over there because last week I ordered a pair of bike shoes so I can start riding the Peloton a little bit. And one of the shoes, the screw plate was like sunk into the shoe. So this dude at REI basically took the shoe apart just to screw in the I don't even know what it's called, honestly. I probably should if I'm getting them, but it's basically like the locking mechanism for your shoes to clip in, or to clip into the pedal. And it was a whole thing, but shout out to him for getting it done and not charging me for the labor for doing it. So yeah, those are my shout outs for this week.
I just want to point out the face that Eric was making while you're talking about bike shoes. It was the face of someone who smells like, just a mountain of elephant dung in the savannah or something. Just the most disgust, repulsed frown. Like, ugh.
I know. Eric turns his nose up at any exercise that is not walking from one coaster to another.
I mean,
that's
or
a better
dancing,
way to live.
I guess.
Yeah, exactly.
It is a better way to live.
And
I don't know the difference from bike shoes to brake shoes, right? Like, that's what I thought you meant at first. Like, what?
Well, I wasn't like disgusted. I just I was looking at my phone to make sure I wasn't missing any shout outs before I go. And then Corey says the guy from REI, and I'm just like, that's a weird shout out. Okay. That's cool. Dude helped you get some nice bike shoes. I'm sure that was very helpful to you.
Helped me get them to work properly. I already gotten the bike shoes, but you have to screw the clips into it.
Hopefully he tunes into the podcast so he can hear his shout out. You should go back to REI tomorrow and let him know you shouted him out on this very popular show. And
yes, deep into hour 3.
Yes. And so yeah. All right. So first shout out is more of a sad rest in peace to Caleb Swanigan, who's a former Purdue college basketball player. He briefly played in the NBA for the Portland Trailblazers. He passed away today. Don't know the cause of death yet, but obviously 25 years old. That's a very sad story, and we obviously wish his family and friends all the best. And we hope that they are able to appropriately grieve and move on from this tragic occurrence. So, shout out to him. He was one of the best players that Maryland's had to deal with in the Big Ten. Loved watching him play, hated playing against him, and it's really sad to see him go. And also, though, shout out to, obviously, the Golden State Warriors won the title, but shout out to Steph Curry primarily because I kept the receipts from last year when he sat up there with at the podium after they lost the playing game to the Grizzlies, and he said, "You don't want to see us next year." And, well, he's right because they won the chip, so that one came through. And shout out to Klay Thompson for saying "holy cannoli," which was
that was hilarious.
What is that?
And also shout out to Ayesha Curry, who can cook.
Oh yeah, no doubt about it. So again, congratulations to Golden State. Can't wait for next season, but I'm glad to have the offseason here, so where we can just kind of marinate a bit and talk some baseball, and we'll get into fantasy football in a couple of months, and then we'll be back on the wagon, so to speak. And we'll be rolling really nicely. So
If you guys want to send us mailbag questions, you can find us at thesportsballers@gmail.com. If you want to be anonymous, that's fine. We prefer it if you want to get your name out there. Don't be shy. No shame in that. You can find this podcast on. Thank you, Evan, for that. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google, Amazon, and you can follow us on Twitter at SportsBallers18. You can follow us individually as well. Corey is at Corey Puffett. I am at Quagmire67. And Evan is at Evan_Ash13. Thank you guys for tuning in. This was episode 200 of the Sports Ballers podcast. We will be back next week, and we will be talking about all kinds of good stuff, depending on what comes up. Evan will be running that show. Until then, take it easy.